for theirs. So I'm just starting to introduce the day where I'm Michaela. I'm an Associate Support Manager with UnLtd, and we've been working with One Palfrey for a number of years now, and we've got 11 fantastic award winners in the local area doing lots of different things. And today's really a day to a good catch-all, I'm hoping, although it's quite a long session and we'll be chopping it up with breaks. We're covering all bases. I've been listening to what people still need support with or what they need ongoing support with. And we came and had a physical event about a month ago. I know Ebony was at that, Mohammed was at that, Amrit and Zuleika were at that. These were some of the things that got talked about. There was a whole range of things that people need. Some of them are running virtually on other days. Some of them UnLtd are running as events anyway as part of their overall training program. But then today, what we know, you can't get elsewhere necessarily. We're looking at income generation and funding bids and hoping to share some success stories and some of this stuff. We are thinking about how you go about finding this funding stuff and the best places to stay informed. We started that conversation at the virtual Legacy Links event last night, Thursday, which went well. So we'll pull through some information from that. Really help people look at how do you strengthen your case, whether it's for funding, whether it's for commission, whether it's whatever it's for. There are some key things that help you make it all work. And some of it is to do with the level of data and how you've evidenced your demand for this stuff. And that's when we'll look at the sort of PESTLE reports and ways of planning what you're doing and gathering the information to back that up. And we'll have a whistle-stop tour of impact measurement after lunch. And we'll no doubt have informal conversations as well on, how we go about networking in the right places. What I'd really like you to leave with today is, having had time to reflect on what your income generation model looks like or how it's evolving and changing, and we'll reflect on that. I want you to be able to know different ports of call when you're looking for funding and those sorts of options, but that's not the be all and end all. I'd like to make sure that you know how to and where to find a slick information, slick data, research that you could never do in a million years that already exists, so you don't have to do half of it. There was plenty of stuff you have to do or that you should be building into the way you're planning what you're doing, but there's so much out there, and we'll talk about all that. But also giving you the tools to start to do your own social value measurement work or planning what is that, why bother, and how it could help you in a range of ways. So that's what I'd like you to leave with. And this bid canvas doc, basically it's making sure that you've got everything in place so that if you start to apply for funding, you know how to do it, you know where you're going. And like Ebony, who we've got on the call, has applied for a few rounds of funding now, as has Amrit, who'll join later, as have I many times. It's a faff. So if you've got everything, all your ducks in a row, you can cut and paste and repeat the process so it doesn't feel like you're going through this painful exercise every time. We'll give you some time to think about how you'll pull all that together. Does that sound okay? Mm-hmm. It sounds like a lot, doesn't it? And who knows, we might not get through it all, but I think we will. I think we can. So I shall make a bit of a start, and I will get you talking and thinking in a minute, so it's not just my monologue. So the first thing I said we'd look at is income generation. So I call this, how does your income generation cocktail stack up? Lots of people, when they first develop an idea, or particularly if they come to UnLtd, or they're just thinking about starting out or getting something that they've been tinkering with for a while really moving, often it takes a while to work out where the business model is in this. And often when you're first starting, particularly if you've got a social purpose behind what you're doing, the money isn't always at the forefront of your mind, either because you don't like asking, or you're not used to talking, or maybe you've not had a sales background and those sorts of things. You think, the community's at the forefront of your mind, and they may or may not be able to afford to pay for what you're trying to do anyway. So how do you make that work? And then, it just, even when you think you know where the money's coming from, in reality, when you start trying it, there's a good chance it might work completely differently. So at the start of any venture, or even over the years, it's always good to keep checking in on where you're at with this stuff. What I have got, and I can email it across to you shortly, is we've got this presentation that I'm running through now, but I put together another little presentation called I think I call them worksheets or worksheet templates. And this is like a template document really, where you'll, in a moment, we'll give you a bit of a breather for yourself to have a think about what's happening in your world. I think Ebony might have seen a little bit of this before, but hopefully it's never a bad thing to go back over where the hell is the money coming from in this venture to make it work. So before you go away and have a think about how things are working for you, and then we'll come back as a group and sort of discuss this in the round, you know, just refreshing our minds on what these buzzwords or what these words mean. So trading is obviously, it's sales of products and services. It's potentially, you know, taxable. But the benefit of trading, oh, here's Sabina, dial-in. Oh, they're both here. Sorry, I'll just, oh, we've got another laptop. Oh, I'm doing two things at once. I just admit, oh, that's the easiest thing. We're trying again. I think she's found another laptop, bless her. Hopefully the mics will work. So we'll just let them in and I'll prattle on. I think, are we in the room? I think we're there. Oh, how are we doing? So Zabina's just joined us. So welcome, Zabina.
Morning.
Thanks for making it. And I know Emma's trying to join us, but I can't see a microphone on her. So whatever she's switched to is still not happy. But anyway, we'll try not worry about the tech too much. It'll do what it needs to do. It looks like whatever Emma's on hasn't got a microphone. Whatever the new James the Welsh laptop's not happy either. Apologies. So I can always support you another day on nailing the right piece of kit to get on this stuff. The thing that can actually work best, Emma, if you've got a smartphone, is if you text or email yourself the Zoom link and click that. A smartphone rarely messes it up. I shouldn't say that out loud because it'll go and do it. But I find if your laptops aren't happy with their mics in connecting to what they should be doing, your phone, I've never had a phone not let me do what
okay, yeah. Oh, it's me, Emma.
Yeah. Oh, you're in.
Hopefully.
Fabulous. Oh, a little bit echoey, but we've got you there. So fantastic. Oh, is that on James's?
Yeah.
Awesome. Okie doke. Oh, well, we'll see it. Perfect. I've got your little microphone up now. So don't you worry there. At least you're in and I think we're sorted. So we're going to leave you to have a think in a moment, and I will email this document over that I said I was going to, so that you've got these templates to use now or to print out or to use in the future. So for now, you might just want to think about this or do it on a little bit of paper. But I was explaining that we never quite know where our business model is going to really work in a social enterprise at the start. And it's an evolving beast, actually, because of the way money flows in and out of social enterprises, charities, social ventures. There's quite a lot of options. And I was just, before you have a think about this yourself, trading, commissioning, fundraising, funding, social finance and investment are the typical routes, you know, to doing this and to making things work. Trading, you know, whether it's products or services to mainly, you know, the public, the wider world, business to business trading. There's different ways, different customers where you can physically see your customer, hand the thing over and they're paying for it, is usually how trading works. The beauty of trading is people, you know, you can do what the hell you like with that money, unlike some of the other ways of earning a living in a social enterprise. It's money that you've got less strings attached. And clearly you've got to cover all of your overheads and you've got to do this, that and the other. But trading is by far and away the best and I wouldn't say easiest, but one of the easiest ways. And the other beauty of trading is you can spend hours and hours and hours getting your marketing right, getting your stuff out there, finding your customers, and you've got those customers and there's a good chance they might come back and be repeat customers. Whereas with funding and fundraising, it's rare that you can keep going back. You know, so, you know, as much as I'm going to talk today about funding and fundraising, I'm just going to mute. I think that was there we go. Yeah, as much as we're going to talk funding and fundraising today, time and time again, I will always suggest trading is by far and away. potentially a better way of spending your time than staying up till midnight trying to write funding bids, thinking, oh, you know, it's highly competitive. Am I going to get this thing? Do I know what I'm doing? Am I in the right ball pool? Do I meet the criteria? If you find your customers and they're out there and you're offering them something they want to buy, why wouldn't you do that? You know, and the thing with social enterprises is what often happens, and the reason we get into this kind of business model is often it's either a market push and it's highly innovative, and so you know, it takes some time for people to have an awareness and understanding of what you're trying to do, and so selling it initially can be a bit fiddly because if that's an innovation. It can be a bit fiddly because you've not got the confidence or the contacts or the route yet to selling something, or more often than not, it can be a bit fiddly selling stuff because often the market that you're selling to can't afford to pay for it. More often than not, social enterprises are trying to sell products and services to people that, you know, might be facing some sort of hardship or setback or financial difficulty or in a community of deprivation. So that's why social enterprises and charities and these sort of models exist, so that products, services, and all sorts of community needs, you know, can be addressed in a business for good or a social enterprise type model. So trading's hopefully fairly clear. Commissioning, it's almost like a wholesale version of trading. That's the way I kind of describe it. And so commissioning will often happen with commissioners. It might be with commissioners, it might be educational. I don't know who I've got here. I'm just going to mute that. There we go. Commissioners can be from all sectors really, but we often think of them as public sector. So local councils, health and social care commissioners, educational commissioners I mentioned. The voluntary community sector are commissioners in their own right. We'll often commission, it's basically how we choose to spend our money, but usually when we're talking about commissioning, it's at quite a larger scale. People kind of bulk buying services.
Oh, is this the one?
We're off again. So I'm only muting you, Ebony, because it sounded like you were talking in the background there. I didn't want us to have to, you know, hear your conversation if it's private. So commissioning, we can talk about all of these, and if you've got any questions in a minute, happy to kind of mull through these and help make sense of them. But hopefully that's fairly clear that commissioning, you know, usually you're meeting a commissioner's brief or a tender document or that goes out, or you're in a procurement portal, they're called, and you're looking at what opportunities exist. So you're either being commissioned to do something bespoke, or you're looking at a call out for work that needs delivering, and you're coming up with a contracted solution to address it. And that's what that's all about. Usually there's a predetermined budget for these sorts of things, whether or not that's published or not. And there's often, whereas with trading, you can do what the hell you like. There's nobody really to report to other than, you know, your accounts to the taxman and company's house, and, you know, reporting to your board and being accountable to your general sort of community. Commissioning will often have additional layers of reporting attached to it to either unlock more money. Sometimes they're on payment by results models, for example, and you have to demonstrate certain types of reporting before you can progress, and other forms of reporting depending on what kind of stuff you're doing. And then a big part of what we'll be looking at and talking about today around funding and fundraising is the other flip side. So that funding and fundraising is supposedly free money. In reality, it really isn't. You know, there's a lot you have to do to get it. And some of you will know because you've been doing it. We can share some of those tales shortly. There's a difference though. You know, fundraising is anything, and fundraising doesn't have a form and doesn't have eligibility criteria. That's the difference. So fundraising, it might be donations, it might be running special sort of fundraising events to raise awareness whilst bringing that kind of money. Fundraising can also include donations from sort of specialist groups. You know, if you've got a particular group that you're like a friends of group that might fundraise on your behalf, and it might also include lots of pro bono stuff actually. So pro bono time, pro bono use of space. People forget about ways of raising resources, cash and other resources, to save the cost of your physical kind of expenditure needs. So quite often, whether you're starting out in any old business, but especially when, I will come back to you in a minute, Arfan, any old business, you'll be doing an element of pro bono stuff. There's nobody starts with business and doesn't need, you know, access to free stuff and, you know, putting in time in kind and all of that sort of thing. But often social enterprises and charities, because of there's a cause or there's a social purpose, or they may have, you know, governing documents in a governance model that means that either they've got charitable status or they're clearly a not-for-profit, and people are happy to donate to whatever it is they're doing. Fundraising is an aspect for them. Funding is a slightly different thing, which is, you know, grants basically. Grants where it's not necessarily a commissioning opportunity, it's money that's been set out there to address needs, a bit like commissioning often is, but they're set up for you to apply for money to do all sorts of things like you are. So what I would always say is funding's great for research and development of the starting up. It's very rare that you will get core funding to you know, for a long period, but there's no harm in looking at that and trying, and particularly if you're working with communities of hardship or you've got charitable status and you've got a long track record, you might be in a better position for that. But that's why I term this thing as a cocktail, because you can't just use one of these income streams to make your project or business work. You have to have a mixture. And last but not least, the big box in the middle there, social finance and investment. Yes, grants do sit in that broad term, social finance and investment. But from my point of view, social finance and investment is something that you go for when you are bigger, larger, you've got a viable model where you're taking on loans or equity, or perhaps a blended model of loan grant mix. Sort of some of those options are out there as well. You've got to pay the stuff back. So trading clearly comes to you, providing you're covering your costs and hopefully making a profit. You can do what you like with that. Commissioning, usually you've got to have it all budgeted to the last penny. You can squeeze in creative ways of making margins on certain things, but it's not really a hugely profitable exercise, depending on who's commissioning you and how you're sort of juggling the financial plans around that. Funding and fundraising, again, usually you're having to, you know, it's money that you get that you don't have to give back. But every time with social finance and investment, loans and equity, there's some sort of payback to whoever's offering that stuff. And as I say, I don't kind of funnel people down that route unless they've been running a few years, because you just wouldn't be in the ballpool to go for it. And unless there's a business model there, they've got like what they call a minimum viable product or service that's repeatable, that you've got clients or whoever for, and you usually use social finance and investment to scale up in some way. So that's the options in a nutshell. And now Arfan's got his hand up, so I'll come to Arfan, and then I'm just going to stop this so we can see each other again for a minute. And I wonder if anybody's got any questions. So Arfan, if you fire away first, we'll just take a few questions or reflections from people on what I've just been saying, and then I'll leave you for 5-10 minutes to just map through your own venture. Where are you at in these boxes and what's happening for you? So, Arfan, have you got your hand up, Arfan?
Yes. Sorry, guys, I got caught up with the police surgery, so I missed the first part of this. You may have covered it, but I was going to ask, there are some quite strict rules around fundraising. And obviously your constitution has to support that you're able to fundraise. So if you can have some guidance about that as well, please.
You can do. I'm not covering legal structures today, if I'm honest. I've got another webinar on that I can send to people. So I wasn't planning on covering that, but you may, you know, clearly as we get into them talking about fundraising, I do start to talk about what you've got to do and how you've got to be in order to be able to apply in the first place. So we'll be covering things like that as part of what we're doing, but I haven't got a slide in here that's walking through legal structures, mainly because most people have either formed one or have had a one-to-one conversation with people about that. But we can certainly have that conversation where people have got questions or concerns or are hitting brick walls with their own sort of governance setup.
With them grant funding and commissioning, that's a bit easier to manage. But with fundraising, there's a lot of restrictions on what you can raise for and how you put that through your account and stuff. So just a slide on that.
I mean, in reality, that there are and there aren't, Arfan. I mean, it depends who you're going to. It depends what fundraising activity you're doing, and who's giving you that opportunity. So if you want to crowdfund, anybody can crowdfund. There's no major restrictions on that. So anybody and everyone can fundraise. It just depends on the pitch, where the money's coming from, and the vehicle that you're using to do it. And so if you were going to go fundraising at Asda supermarket, for example, ASDA are probably going to want to check that you've got a constitution as a not-for-profit group and organisation. So, you know, if you want to fundraise somewhere and do something in a particular way, you might be asked to evidence the fact that you're a not-for-profit group, organisation, charity, or whatever. That anybody can go out there and raise funds. They just have to be going to the right audience with the right message, and be transparent about what they're doing and where the money will go. And does that make sense? I don't know whether you've got.
It froze. I missed most of it, but it's fine. It's covered, and I can chat with you another time about it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and certainly the groups that we're supporting here predominantly are setting up not-for-profit governance models, so their structures should be appropriate for pretty much all types of fundraising. There are some funds and some ways to fundraise where having charitable status will be key, but for most things, so long as you're not a profit organisation and you're transparent about how you're going about fundraising, you're keeping clear accounts about what you're doing and where money's going, and you're communicating with your audience about what you're doing and why, it's down to the individuals to, do I trust this? Will I want to back this? Am I throwing my money in the bucket, or whatever the situation might be? But like I say, with crowdfunding platforms and things like that, and you know, people backing individuals to do all sorts of things, fundraisers become a bit of a broader church to some degree.
It gets complicated when you're doing buckets and door to door. It gets a bit more complicated, doesn't it?
Well, you'd need to have charitable. You'd need. It depends who's offering it and what you're doing with it. But in reality, that's a hard slog, and there's much quicker and more effective ways to get your money in. Yeah. You know. Yeah. So, has anybody got any particular questions? I'll just pop that slide back up in case people need their sort of memory jogging. Anybody got any particular questions or thoughts before we ask you to have a little think about this? You might have been doodling yourself there. Anything unclear? Anything you wanted to check or comment on, or no? Nothing yet. Well, what I was going to ask is if I just pop this slide up here, if for now, if you've got a bit of pen and paper there, doodle out your boxes and just have a think, whether you're physically doing it or whether you plan to do it, or whether it's just an idea and you're wondering. See if you can think of ways that you, your team, or your organisation can be generating income in these different ways. I'll just give you 5 minutes or so to just have a bit of a doodle there. And in the meantime, I am going to email the people on the call this set of PowerPoint slides that I put together. We've got the ones that I'm working through on this call, and then I put a separate, almost like a little workbook together. So I'll just send that to people in case they want to use that.
Kayla.
Yeah.
Hiya, it's Emma.
Hiya.
Hiya. I'm not sure if you think of the model that I wanted to copy, where, you know, which one, the network.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure which one it fits into. Obviously, there's no profit. There's nothing to trade. It's not a product. I guess it's a service. It's a support. So I'm not sure which fits in.
Well, we can certainly. I will give me 2 secs, and I'll walk through that. Yours is perhaps as a bit of an example, and then other people might sort of share theirs. Right. I'm just checking I've got everybody who I was going to send this to. Safina, Zabina, just while you're having a think. Who else? I'll CC Arfan, so you've got this as well, Arfan. There we go. Is that everybody? 1, 2. I think so. Great. So I'll send that across for now. I'm not going to write anything in the thing. It's just it's a PowerPoint presentation, but you can either type on it, or you can print it out and write on it, or you can just have it there as it, rather than sifting through all the PowerPoint presentation slides that I'll send after the session, you've got this set of worksheets that you can instantly use when, you know, I'm hope there's several of these kinds of worksheets where you'll be able to use as a quick, short, sharp tool to come back to, you know, because we won't have it all cracked today. This takes months, if not years, to kind of evolve and get, you know, running smoothly. But so send, at least you've got that if you want to use it. So while people are thinking, I'm just going to walk through Emma's query there, and hopefully it might be of interest to others as we're going. So I think there we go. So I've just pulled it back up. So in terms of, so Emma's looking at setting up, would you want to say yourself what you're looking at setting up, Emma? Because it'll be helpful for Marble Health, who've just joined us, to hear that, because they're doing something similar-ish but different. So do you want to just describe what you're trying to do a little bit, Emma?
Yeah, don't know if everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
So what we are trying to put together is a middle step for people who are going from having no care to knowing they need care, either with or without funding. So we know that there's a care crisis at the moment, and people are either on waiting lists or they're not getting the right care coming into their home. So we want to do more of a bespoke service, but do it as a charity. So we want to walk people through the care process. For somebody who's got dementia or some kind of learning difficulty, for somebody to come into their house and then have no support on the choice of that person and no say in the recruitment of that person, it's not ideal. The person through the agency will only get a fraction of what the end user is paying.
Mm-hmm.
So we want people to pay less and the carers to get more, and for the person to be right, and for there to be somebody to basically hold their hand through the care process.
Fab. And hopefully that's interesting, hopefully for Sabina and Safina to hear, and we'll come back and make sure we can create time for you guys to connect further, and they'll no doubt talk more about what they're doing as the day goes on. But in your case, Emma, as a first port of call, we've been working with you to look at setting up a constitution so that you can start to do some funding bids. Initially, it's less of a fundraising thing, what you're doing, because fundraising, you're an unknown quantity, you're not set up as a not-profit just yet, and it's like, it's not the ideal place. Fundraising might kick in for you further down the line when you've got clients and people, and maybe they want to go out on a day trip. But once you've got your network and you've got your first 20 to 30 customers, that group of older people might want to set up some sort of friends group, or you might want to do something additional with them or for them. And at that point, fundraising might be an option to buy things for people that can't afford it, or to go on, like I say, go on a day trip, or do things like that. So fundraising might kick in further down the line, but right now with the constitution, applying for some funding to pilot what you're doing will be the thing to do. So if we can help get you, you know, £2,000 to £5,000 or thereabouts, more if we can, but from a standing start, probably more so that smaller amount, it will help. A bit like Deb in a similar boat. She's got all this experience, like you've got lots of experience, Emma, all this experience, but you're just getting things together. And so getting the money to test and pilot and trial things, bring money to cover, you know, whatever, meeting rooms, Zoom costs or refreshments, to bring your stakeholders together to talk about almost like focus groups around what they need, how's it going to work, who'd pay for what. So there's a kind of focus group that you could get funding to run, that's for your families and older people. And Safina and Zabina are in quite a similar boat for that sort of thing. There's also looking at who are these carers going to be, you know. There might be people who want to come and work for you, but you've perhaps not found them yet. So you might get funding to, again, bring them into a room, get them talking, telling you about their work experiences, or what they are and aren't happy about, and you know, what a good broker of recruitment options might look like, you know, so that it would make them jump ship and come to you. Or you might want to put on specialist training courses or work with somebody who offers that to find good quality people and get them really well trained up to a standard or your standard or whatever. So finding funding to piece those building blocks together will be an initial income generation option. And as you quite quickly, if you've got your first 5 or 6 families, and like I say, Marble Health in a similar boat where they've been talking to people, they've got families sort of around the edges. If they can get their first 5 to 10 families, having one-to-ones with them to diagnose their needs, once you've piloted this, in theory, that there's different routes to income for this, aren't there? There's finding funding to do the trials or to reach your first 30 to 50 customers, you know, or potential customers. When you found them, you've got to be careful that you're not offering everything for free so that they won't then pay you. And you can say it's something subsidized. So quite often you'll get funding in to make something cheaper. So rather than charge the public, I don't know, 20 or 30 pounds an hour, you're charging them 10 or 15, so that funding is topping up and subsidizing the cost of the service that you're trying to deliver. And then after you've been going, I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, you then start to move into the, unless you've got a track record in this, or unless you've got access to commissioners and connections, you'll then start to be able to go to people who are commissioning services to say, we're up and running, we've got this service, these people are benefiting in these ways, we can address all these objectives that you want to deliver on, but if you commission us. So, you know, you pay us 10, 20, 30,000 pounds per contract or per year or whatever it is. So there's a kind of trajectory, I'll talk about this later, there's a trajectory that you go on from a standing start where, you know, initially funding and fundraising is kind of where you start to test your model of your services and products, which means that you can start trading, whether you're trading with the people you imagine you want to work with, like people who really need it, or whether you have to trade with other people who can afford it. And that's where social enterprises either they get a bit of cross with themselves because they really want to work with these people, but they actually have to start working with the people who can afford to pay for it first and build up the money in order to then go back to the people that they wanted to work with in the first place. That can sometimes happen. But either way, getting funding to test stuff for that research and development angle, then working out what some trial products and services are that you can then get people to pay for, whether it's subsidized payments or whether it's full payments, depending on who they are, or a sliding scale payment service, and then working your way through. And it takes time, you know. Ebony will be on the call here, like not tutting, but you know, thinking, God, you know, she's been running what she's been running a little while. And to be fair, it's only been a year or so, and it can take a good 2 to 3 to 5 years to be in the ball pool of where commissioners will take you seriously. And because they're dealing with much larger sums of money, because they're dealing with a whole bunch of people they already commissioned to that are tried and tested and you know, become their mates. So why would they commission you? You know, commissioners want their lives to be as simple as possible. And when budgets are being cut and one another, they've got to make hard decisions, but they'll certainly open to listening to good quality services that can make their lives easier and that can do things in a more cost-effective way than whoever they're commissioning at the moment, or a more impactful way. So hopefully does that answer some of what you were thinking, Emma? Does it give you some food for thought around the journey through this? And I'll come to.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just thinking, like you say, it's going to take time, and we're only at the research stage at the moment. It's been a good idea, we think. There's definitely a need for it. Yeah. I was just thinking of a comparison of the Care Trust, which is basically a charity, I think, which supports unpaid carers and gives them various freebies and support groups and things like that. Mm-hmm. Do you know how that was set up and funded?
I don't, but we can definitely come back to that at another time, if that's all right. I might come to Arfan because I know he'd got his hand up, and then we might come to other people on the call and just see what they've been sort of jotting down, if that's all right. So you've got something to add or a question there, Arfan. I saw a hand up.
Sorry, I put it in chat that we're delivering 100 food parcels.
Yeah.
So we could put your leaflet in for Marble Health if you wanted that to go in there.
Brilliant. Yeah, definitely. I'm sure Savina and Zabina would find that really helpful. And
Yes,
Sabina,
please.
have you had a chance to have a think there and doodle some of this out? I know we've kind of talked around this a little bit if you've been to other sessions, but have you?
I've been making notes as you've been talking, Michaela, and of course, just when and Emma was having a chat as well, just something, because the scope is so big. So I think something that Emma mentioned there, I was thinking, like, in the past we've done advocacy services as well in the organisations I work for, and there's so many different aspects of how you can try and reach out to what you want to deliver. But for me, obviously, we hadn't thought about the fundraising part, if I'm being honest, at all. And the trading was one of our private options, wasn't it, for anybody that's obviously can afford to pay. But it's got me thinking about the trading aspect of it a bit more, like what it actually means.
And it's how you can use any of these in quite creative ways. Arfan's right, you've got to have an air of caution around fundraising, but at the same time you can use the fundraising as a really interesting way to both boost your reputation and credibility and awareness in the community. I'm not saying you're going to do this, but let's say you wanted to put on you could do it in partnership with One Palfrey potentially, because they're doing things like this already. If you wanted to put on a coach trip for older people to go Christmas shopping, or to go to the seaside, or to go to the theatre, or whatever old people locally might want to do, doing some sort of fundraising exercise to whether it's raffles or whether it's some sort of event that then raises money to there's a million ways to think of how might we raise £200 to £500 that gives us chance to create an activity or a day out or whatever. People might not want to come and buy your services just yet, but they might fancy whatever it is, whatever the activity is. And if by the time you've put on a few activities and people are enjoying them and they're building trust with you because you're doing fun stuff for them, they're in a safe environment, they're meeting new people and they're having a good experience, you can then use the kind of fun stuff to ask your questions, or to find out, do your research by stealth, whilst everyone's trapped on a coach or whatever it might be. I don't know. There's sometimes you've got to find creative ways of, and don't get me wrong, at the moment, with the way things are with COVID, things aren't straightforward. I totally understand that. But I know that Arfan has been doing some interesting things with families and other people. And like we've talked about before, it's not always the older people. Absolutely, you want to hear what older people need, and you'd rather put them at the forefront of who's informing your services. But there's a good chance their sons, daughters, other relatives might be kind of being roped in to support with care or that sort of thing. So even if Arfan's got a day out in Blackpool, and he's got 15 families, that's 15 families that you could be having a chit chat with on the bus on the way there and on the way back. So I don't know if I'm talking out of turn there, Arfan, but sometimes you have to kind of piggyback on other opportunities as well.
Absolutely.
Captive audience on a coach is brilliant, because they can't go anywhere. So
exactly.
We've got a coffee afternoon on Wednesday afternoons, so you can pop into that if you want.
Excellent.
And the same goes for you, Emma. Initially to find these people, I know you've been using social media quite well, and there's various forums, and getting hold of the carers and then getting hold of other people. I think bringing an element of sort of fun and relaxedness to whatever it is you're doing just makes people feel like, who wants to go to a focus group? Only weird geeks like me might go to a focus group. They want to go and do something else. Usually you don't call it that, and it often has to feel quite different, but that's ultimately what it is. And it's about coating it or putting it in a format that's going to attract your audience.
They can get a bit more attractive.
We funded someone to do 6 weeks of on-the-door exercise for the elderly in Milton Close. So if you wanted something to discuss with them at that time, they'll be out on the doorstep anyway. So and then for Remembrance Day, we're going to have a trailer just giving free tea and coffee for those residents. So if you want to pop in that day, you're welcome to as well.
Excellent.
I was just going to come to Mark and Deb there. They're looking very industrious. I don't know if they're planning the next holiday or if they're really doing the work, but I thought I'd just see how you get on.
We're just writing and thinking about what to say and how far we are along, and we've got some really good ideas.
Good.
That's what we were doing. We're on task.
I was just
Can I ask you a question, Deborah? Have you got any insurance in place?
If people got insurance in place, our fan was asking.
I'm asking
Oh
Deborah.
yeah, sorry, we have, yeah. Mobile health social care, we have, yeah.
Deborah, have you?
No,
Oh, okay.
not no, but I do know I have to have it. But I'm
No,
not.
it's fine.
I'm not up and running yet, but I do know I have to have insurance
That's absolutely
and
fine.
other things in place before I can actually start.
And
Like,
there's different ways of going about getting insurance. So if you was a
and there is there are web things you can join, organisations online
Yes.
I can join that
Yeah.
will offer insurance if you become a member. So there are all sorts of ways that I can get insurance.
Yeah, there's I was going to say there's sort of three ways that people sort of sometimes think about insurance when they're getting started. If they're a sole trader and they're not setting up social enterprise or group related or constituted groups or KICs or any of that, they're just on their own, you know, they'll be setting their sort of insurance up as a sole trader. If you've constituted a group, your group can seek insurance. It would be you as individuals if you're unincorporated that will get that insurance, but it can be for your group activities. If you've set up a KIC or a company or something like that, it'll be the company that gets this insured. And what I was going to say is typically, depending on what you're doing, you know, public liability insurance is often the one that people will go for as a kind of catch-all. When you're first testing, so let's say you were just getting going and you're just having a go at this stuff, the venues that you operate in will have public liability insurance. So in theory, slips, trips and falls and everything else should be covered by, you know, so for research purposes and at that early research stage, you can, in theory, if you're just doing a few ad hoc bits and pieces and it's just research and conversations and you're out and about in a venue somewhere, you can rely on the public liability insurance of the venue that you're in. However, when you start developing your own services, when you start operating and you're potentially giving it, not all of you will, but you might be offering advice and guidance and things like that, I would suggest that people want to get public liability and professional indemnity insurance. Those are the two insurances that people normally get. And then an additional one that some people get from the outset or they build it in later is employers liability insurance, so that for employees, volunteers and other people who are delivering things on your behalf, you've covered all bases then. And as an example, Flourish Together, we've had those insurances for years now, and I think I pay something like £24 a month for those three insurances to know that I'm covered. And don't ask me what the ceiling is, but it's worth getting as high as insurance as you can afford or that you can get. And usually you're covered, I can't remember, it's something like 2 to 5 million is, you know, you're usually not insured for less than that, you know.
Kayla, the reason I asked was I was hoping if Deborah had it, we could have used Deborah because LTO One Morsel has told us last week that apparently we're not covered by the insurance anymore. With our volunteers, our activities, they're not covered by the insurance. And we've got activities next week. So we were going to be cheeky and fund Deborah to fund our sessional staff, but we'll have to get that.
It takes 2 minutes to get your insurance, by the way.
Can you send me that link? Can you send me that link? You know, the link that you said you've got all three together. Would you be able to send me that?
Which one's this? What link of what? Sorry.
You said that you've got indemnity insurance and
yeah, I just use Hiscox insurance.
Hiscox.
I use Hiscox insurance. They're a national insurer and they're not very expensive. They're straightforward. They're well reputed and I used to working with small businesses, small organizations. You know, they pride themselves on working with SMEs, I guess is one of their strap lines. But there's lots of insurers out there, and as Deb said, sometimes it's best you have to go through a specialist insurer. And I don't know if Sabina's there, but I know Safina went through a right minefield trying to get your insurance. While we're on the topic, I don't know if you want to. You may.
Yes, sorry. Yes, basically we shopped around, did a lot of online research, and Safina, bless her, at that time she had more time to kind of look into it. But we had to look at the details because we were always looking at providing advice as well. So we had to look at which insurance would cover that aspect of it.
Yeah.
So we had to be quite, clear and look at the level of cover we can have and what does it actually include. But then we managed to source one. But yeah,
it can be quite specialist, I suppose, is the point I'm making. And whether, there are some social enterprises that are doing quite specialist things. They're not doing traditional business services. Sometimes is it the combination of what you're doing or the community that you're working with or whatever it might be, or sometimes either going through quite specialist providers, or like Deb says, if you can't, some sectors where you're coming across those headaches, actually, like I'm thinking like youth work and youth services, and working with ex-offenders, or I don't know, drug rehabilitation, or musicians doing this, that and the other. There are specialist kind of bodies that you can go through to get, you know, your insurance. Or if you sign up to the National Union of Musicians, as an example, they will have preferred insurers, or you might get your insurance as part of your membership. So there's different models there, but it's just a case by case sort of options. But most people can just go through a standard insurer and get those 3 insurances that I mentioned, amongst others that might be suitable for what people are doing. So we've kind of gone off piece there, but it's quite a useful topic. So that's, you know, with that, we'll take a break shortly because I know we've been on for a little while, but hopefully, you know, it's one of those. Ebony, we've not come to you. I realise you're back in the room. Did you do anything to add on this? I know you've done this exercise before, but I just wonder.
Yeah, but do you know what? I was going to say, I'm finding it extremely useful as an activity of encouragement, and that's what I was just going to say to everyone on here. It sort of, you do this activity, I don't know, once every 6 months, every year, and it's interesting to see what you will write down today now, which is just ideas, you know, like I think Deborah was just saying, and then actually having it written down and really having a really targeted plan, and then you can see the changes. So for me, for example, the commissioning box, it was empty before. I had to just have a belief in my idea, and I was doing like my NHS referrals, for example, for free, and I have been doing that for the last 9 months, to show effectiveness, to show use. And now conversations are opening after our legacy link Zoom, Michaela, the other day. You know, Dave's already started steamrolling things, and there's meetings going to be planned, and you know, I know it's not going to be overnight, but it's really interesting and nice to see the boxes that you probably haven't, you know, I didn't think about a year ago, now opening up. And also Walsall Council, I did my first tender bid, you know, and that was an experience. It's probably the worst form I've ever done in my life.
Those portals that you have to put.
Yeah, oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. But it's interesting, the transition that you'll go through, and it's just really important to just persevere on and start off with one thing. I mean, I started off with funding, and that was where the beginning, it sort of all started, and looking at a bit of trading, did my journal, but you just take it slow and steady, and then as you project your need, so like for me now, sort of 60 and above clients, I'm like, well, I've got proof of this now. I'm really interested in the part that's coming up later about
social value stuff.
The social impact and stuff like that. But yeah, this activity, it's been amazing, and just anyone who's feeling really daunted over it, I still feel daunted now, you know, 2 years in, but you just take little by little, and it will just grow. And Unlimited are great, and Michaela's great, and Arfan's great, that if you have a more personal question, you can sort of ask more individually, and you know.
I think what people don't realise is how long things can take, and I think preparing yourself emotionally and financially for that, you know, is something to bear in mind. But I think, you know, if I think about Flourish just quickly, and before we move on, you know, Flourish was a twinkle in our eye, you know, 8 years ago. 8 years ago, we had a few, we had 10 women in a room, just our focus group, you know, and I think I just, you know, put aside 50 quid for some drinks to get 10 women in a room, and we just talked about who were we, what was going on, what were the gaps in what was needed, and blah, 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 you know. And from there, we met again, and there were 30 women in a room a couple of months later. And from there, we mapped out what products and services, or what we wanted to develop our products and services around, the principles. And then from there, it kind of all, and it took a while. I mean, we were all in day jobs and doing various things, and we just started off by running a free. If you've got to do things for free to get things started initially, it's like, what am I prepared to do for free, which, you know, you've got to be really careful about. And for us, we knew that we could commit to one free monthly peer learning event. And so we ran you know, I knew that as long as I was earning a certain amount a month through a day job or some other means, I could spare a day or two a month to faff about and to do my research and to get, you know, and you can pack a lot into that time if you structure it well. And so we ran these free monthly peer learning events, and they snowballed really. And once we'd run a bunch of those, I'll cut a long story short, but basically within a couple of years, we'd formed as a kick because we'd seen that it was a business model there and it made sense to us. But initially we just had a constituted group with a few £100s in there to just cover incidentals to make these events happen, and built our services off of that. So what we've ended up with now, you know, we've been going 5 years, we've built our income year on year. I've just taken on 3 part-time staff in this year, and I'm sort of mentioning this because things can take, you know, as I say, it's taken us 8 years to get to this point. We've been paid along the way. I've done plenty of free stuff, but I've made sure that we've been paid for work that we deliver. And so we've ended up with a combination now of we still do fundraising here and there. You know, we've run 4 successful crowdfunding campaigns, and I'm not adverse to running another one if we need to. Initially, we used the money from those crowdfunds to create seed funding to invest in women and run a kind of 12-hour mentoring marathon. Now we've took those into our commission programs. Once we've got our track record of running these things, you know, Manchester City Council, NatWest, the WEA are paying us to run programs, and we took these, what we used to do for free or with very little funding, into a program of delivery. And you know, our name gets out, and there's people, I bet we get 3 or 4 inquiries a week for people who want specialist support. And you're, you know, I say lucky, sounds a bit enough, but you know, you're lucky you're on a program here. You don't have to pay for any of this stuff. But for people who aren't on a program and do need that stuff and have got the means to pay for it, you know, we charge on an hourly rate for business development support. So there's an element of trading there, and funding we tend to go for if we really need it, or if we're growing or developing a new service. So, you know, we're still dancing around these boxes, and, you know, I don't really want to take on finance because we don't need to. We've never needed to take loan finance, and I'm not planning on doing in the short term. The only time we'll take on social finance is if there's a real growth opportunity that we know the money's coming for, or that we've got stacked up ready, and we need to kind of cash flow some new staff, for example. So we could take on a £10,000 loan to part cover a salary for someone to bring home the bacon for what we need. Or the other way that we might take on that kind of high level money in future is we're thinking, because we've been listening to our network about their needs, and there are so many women that can't take forward their ideas because they're in sort of financial difficulties or in poor housing situations, and basically they're not got the economic independence that they need. We're looking at options for addressing housing issues within our network, you know, women in our network, and we're looking at that. So if we want to start buying properties, then we're going to need to get into, you know, finance. But until, you know, it's horses for courses with all this stuff, and there's certainly no right or wrong way, and you just have to kind of test it, trial it, and keep, like Ebony was saying, keep re-looking at it. So I think, should we take a quick comfort break? And then we'll come back to look at applying for funding, actually getting the thing done. So when you're ready, or when you're looking for the next thing, how you go about that, and where you look for stuff. So does it feel about the right time to take a stretch and a top up on a drink? Cool. So perhaps if we take, as long as you need, really, 5 or 10 minutes. I'll be back here by 20 past-ish, and if people are ready, I can do that. If you need till 1/2 past, that's fine too. But we will take another break in about half an hour or so, just have a bit of a longer break. But if we take 5 or 10 minutes now, we'll then get a proper sort of 20-minute break at the next one, so you can grab some lunch. Does that sound all right? Cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all right. And yeah, we'll cover funding in the next bit before we take a longer break, and then after the longer break we'll get into social value measurement stuff, hopefully. Cool. Right, just put my video off. Just check where I'm at. Oh, Safina, here she comes. She'll be like, where are they? Hi, Safina. Have you landed, Safina? I've just seen you coming through. No, where was she? Oops. Are you there, Safina? I don't know if sometimes your computer's not always ideal. I know sometimes you can come off mute, sometimes you can't, but Savina, if you can hear me, I'm just letting you know, we're just taking, you were joined at that time, we're just taking a break. Zabina's on the call. We've gone through a few bits and bobs. We've basically been looking at income generation strategies and thinking through this sort of tool and hearing from people about where they're at and what they're thinking. So we're just taking a short break. We'll be back in 5 minutes or so, about, I don't know, 25 past, half past. We'll kick back in to look at funding and
Okay.
what makes a successful bid and that sort of thing. So you've joined at a good time.
Super. Thanks, Kayla.
No worries. We'll speak shortly. I'm just going to
Thank
turn
you.
my camera off for 5 or 10 minutes while I make a brew.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Right.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
There we go. There's no immediate rush back, but I've just thought I'd best get back here in case anyone's chomping at the bit.
Hi.
Hi. Hopefully it's helpful so far. I know it's hard getting your head around it all when you're kind of new to a lot of this stuff, but
Yeah,
it all starts to filter through.
yeah, no, I mean, it's all sort of coming together. If you think about it, we started talking about this months and months ago, and I didn't have even the tiniest idea of what to do, how to start. I just wanted to sort of try and copy a model that I'd worked at for 6 years and do something similar for I know there's a huge people that need it, but putting it all together is just, I'm literally, in your hands. I haven't unearthly, but it's starting to all make sense now.
Yeah, and we'll at some point we'll create some breakouts shortly to think and chat, and I'll make sure I put you and Safina and Sabina in a room so you can at least make contact. And I think I mentioned to you about their work before, so you can have a look at that. We'll just wait for the others to filter back. I'm kind of one of those days today. I don't know if you heard at the beginning, Emma, I was a little bit late starting this call because one of our directors at Flourish, there's another organisation called She Leads for Legacy, and she's running an event this morning, and Jackie Weaver's one of the key speakers.
Oh yeah, I heard.
And I've sponsored the event, so I thought I best go and say my bit and show that a little tiny organisation like ours can make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think she's got 160 people on this call, Sharon. So yeah, I'll have to do a listen again link. But yeah, sat in a webinar room with her.
Amazing.
Looking very glamorous at 10 o'clock in the morning, I have to say. I don't know if she does it.
She was on TV yesterday.
Oh really? Gets about.
I can't, Return to the Land or Country File or something like that. Yeah, she was on. Yeah.
She's a character. Be good to hear back and hear what gets said there.
And she's been on the Archers.
Oh, has she?
Yes, indeed.
She's living her best life. I love it.
Yes.
And she's met Anton de Bet, one of her heroes.
Yeah. She'll be on Desert Island Discs next.
Rightly so. Yeah, she's definitely trying to do a bit to diversify the way parish councils work as well. I think she's trying to use the platform now, isn't she, to get some new blood, blood in.
And she's got a lethal button finger, hasn't she? She silenced a couple of those disruptive lads at the parish council meeting with a real flourish, and poof, they were gone.
Rightly so.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure she's done what everybody, whether you're male or female, has wanted to do at times, to just cut off the tea and biscuits.
Yeah.
It says me eating cake here. So I'm guessing people are getting back in the room. I can't see everybody. I could probably do with
I'm back.
Everybody back. Good. So I'm afraid there's a bit more of a monologue from me, if that's okay, just to whiz through some bits and pieces, and then we've got some tasks where we'll go away and have a look, and I think hopefully we'll see how we do for time. So what, in thinking about this cocktail, the next chunk of time really is looking at the funding part of things, because that's, whilst we never are encouraging people to become reliant on this stuff, the beauty of running social enterprises, charities, constitute groups is there are these options that aren't as readily available to other models, and you often I've met very few social enterprises, charities or groups that have never had funding. There's the odd one, but in the main, it's a big part of the income sort of generation plans at beginning, middle and into the future of what we do. So just a whistle stop, I'm not going to run through all these, you can read them on the screen, but the point I'm making with this slide is leave no stone unturned. There's funding, it's competitive, it's difficult to stand out above the crowd, particularly through COVID, particularly when the funding landscape's changed over the years. What I'm saying here is, you've got local options and opportunities, be they things like CBSs, different kinds of enterprise support in your area. don't forget about, you know, your universities, housing associations, art networks, the public sector, what's going on locally where you are. And even if you're a million miles away from the nearest university or housing association, you might not be actually, you're in their catchment, and what you're doing might be of interest to their staff, be they researchers, academics, community development workers, housing, neighbourhood renewal people. So, you know, think about the broad routes there, and we will come back to that topic. There's regional stuff out there, and you know, things have gone a bit local or a bit national. The regional stuff that we used to have has disbanded a little bit through all this place-based working, but organisations like the Key Fund, who fund grants and loans and provide support and have massive databases of people that they've funded over the years. The School for Social Entrepreneurs tend to work quite regionally, and in your own areas, you know, just like you've got, you know, One Palfrey there, or you know, the Warsaw or Black Country related groups, networks, forums and organisations. Plug into those, whether it's physically getting to things, getting their newsletters, or looking out for what's going on, or just sifting through their websites for the latest news. There's lots of national agencies. What can happen? What's the beauty of this, or approaching funding in this way, is, if I don't mean this badly, but if your face doesn't fit locally, or if it doesn't fit for a particular sector or theme or wherever it is that you're looking at, you know, national organisations are great for you know, for being able to reach out to, in addition to what's available locally and regionally. And people might have come across bits and pieces, or you might have heard of UnLtd, obviously you might have heard of the lottery, but people forget that there's another swathe of money out there. Isn't just for social enterprises and charities and things, that's there to kind of advance certain sectors, both for private businesses, social enterprises, and anything in between. So whatever sector you're operating across, and I say that because few social enterprises sit in one sector. That's the point of them. They're very cross-sector thinking and acting organisations. So often you might be in health and education, or you might be in youth and the arts, or you might be in health and creative, or whatever your combination of stuff is. There'll be a mixture of things and a mixture of sectors that you're straddling. So it's a pain, because you have to do even more networking and find out even more stuff. But if there's no money in one area, there might be money in another. Or, you know, if what you're delivering isn't making sense to one world, it might make sense to another. So I just throw that out there as something to think about. So a quick checklist on all of this, sort of reiterating a little bit of that. We've got, we know all, you know most of this. So clearly, and I put this together pre-COVID or during COVID, but I do think, as much as there were a lot of unknowns and we're still living through a pandemic, I'm still curious to wonder what additional response and what additional funding is going to come through. So I would say, whether you were or weren't eligible for local grants, discretionary grants, you know, COVID relief money and all this other stuff that was out there, I would still keep an eye on all of that. We don't know the way the wind's going to blow with some of this stuff, and being aware of what Build Back Better, recovery and resilience, you know, whatever buzzwords they want to use for this stuff, there will be additional resources coming through. So keep an eye out for those. And God forbid, particularly if we get locked down or we have to go into any of those other special measures stuff again into the winter or beyond, just be aware that those things exist. And they're not, unfortunately, when you've only been going a year or two, that you fall through the cracks, and which is probably the case for some people, but it's worth seeing what's going on and being aware of them. I've talked about housing associations a minute ago, and I'll come back to them. There's all sorts of funds that housing associations have and routes into them, be it through their community investment funds, be it through services that they're trying to create for tenants and residents, be it working with people where they're trying to get the tenants and residents into increased employability and skills opportunities. So we've talked a bit about them, but they're pretty good to work with. And once you've got a relationship with them, and it's working well, again, there can be a potential sort of repeat commission of your work. When you're not ready to go for big commissioning money, they'll often create bespoke stuff if you can create the right relationships. I I've talked about the WEA before. Some of you that are running things that are around training and employability or educational stuff. I honestly don't know, and we need to find out what the WEA, so the Workers' Education Alliance, what they provide for people in the Midlands. But I only keep them in there because Flourish have worked with them a lot in the last few years. And they had this big ESF contract, European Social Fund contract, that's now clearly coming to an end with us being out the EU, and that money's nearly spent. But they're gearing themselves up for the what next. And I found them really good to work with. And if you're working with people who are currently unemployed, long-term unemployed, or have been on certain benefits, which a lot of the people that we're working with potentially have been, then whether they're young people, middle-aged or retired, they've been quite good. So it'd be worth keeping an eye on what they're doing in the Midlands and watching out for their opportunities, because they do understand the voluntary community sector, and they're often trying to innovate the way community learning takes place in order to reach the hardest to reach and make real differences that traditional colleges or traditional training and education programs might not, which is often where you all sit. We talked about investment a bit. I've just put in there media attention. We'll come back to this, but there comes a point in time where, particularly if you're going, we've not talked much about it, if you're going for sponsorship or if you're going for certain types of partnerships, in order to raise your game, the more media attention you've had, the better, you know. So the grant funder or you know, a local, you know, council commissioner or whoever, they'll be less interested in this. But if you're trying to do crowdfunding, or if you're trying to find some high level sponsors, you know, you banged your head against funding for long enough and you've got this service. So for example, I've got this guy, he's you know, an ex-addict of various substances, one of them being alcohol, and he now runs these dry events. If you've ever heard of these things called dry bars, but it's basically bars or events and festivals where nobody's drinking, because it's not part of what they want to do. They want to encourage people into not drink, not just for people who perhaps had problems with alcohol misuse, but for everybody, for all of our well-being, and just to show that we can have a good time without getting leathered. And so and for lots of cultural communities and other people, that's the norm anyway. So it can be quite inclusive in the way these events are run, because it's festivals and events and he's wanting to reach certain audiences, just like with the big large festivals, I don't know, Leeds, Glastonbury, stuff like that. Company sponsorship should be a good route for him. And so we've been working with him to look at how he can raise his profile, because the only way he's going to get big companies to bother to back him or to want to sponsor, heavily sponsor what he's doing, is if they're going to get more PR, more media attention and so on. So it's not for everybody, but if you're working in a model or a world or a business where this might be helpful, and I think Ebony's certainly in that ball, Paul, Amrit potentially, it just varies. I mean, everybody's got potential, you know, corporate and company and wider public sector sponsors that they might want to approach, but media attention is something you have to bear in mind if you're going down that route, and having some in your back pocket and have achieved some is key for that. I mentioned crowdfunding before. I don't know if any of you ever crowdfunded. Be interested to hear. I think we've kind of had that chat, but be interesting to just, we talked about all these other things. Has anyone crowdfunded or used crowdfunding? To go on, feel free to come off mute and tell us all about it.
Nicola?
Yeah, fire away. Go for it, Mark.
Haven't yet crowdfunded in terms of money for myself or for me and Deb, but we've contributed to fundraising in that way. Yeah. And I've been doing something quite recently with a couple of women's issues, and the funding went from about zero to, I think it's about £80,000 in a week. It's a very powerful thing.
It's not easy to make happen. People think it's easy and it's not, but when it works a treat. Whether it's just trying to raise a few thousand or whether it's snowballing for something large like that. And what was it for, and what made you want to back it?
It's in terms of making sure that we've got freedom of speech and
in universities
and university academic freedoms. It was around
just
an academic who had been threatened by her employers and needed some support.
So, and she's done it's very well. I mean, it's very well supported. She went from literally nothing to, like Mark said, in a few days. So it just depends on what your cause is, whether it sort of ignites interest. You know, and I think anything that, particularly in relation to what we're trying to do, our small businesses, if it's seen as giving something back to the community or whatever, then these sorts of things could be well supported. And
I do think that there's an opportunity locally to tap into folks who are doing that nationally. There must be some stuff going on at the moment. I just know there has got to be around how we better support Afghan people who've come to this country. There may not be a particular local project, but you could be part of something that's got a national focus, and you could deliver something locally. And there must be all sorts of issues around that. I think, especially in terms of refugee and migrants, but also in terms of this green revolution is going to happen, and there's going to be opportunities there, I believe, as well.
Absolutely. Well, it's just good to hear, you know, that I've backed lots of them. I've set up quite a lot of crowdfunding campaigns myself. So we've run 4 successfully, and then we've supported about 12 other social enterprises to raise in excess of £350,000 across them. And even when you think all hope is lost and this, that, and the other, there are some golden rules. I wasn't necessarily going to go through today about crowdfunding. I've got a podcast on that, and I can talk to people individually about how you make crowdfunding work. But I just mentioned a few there. Crowdfunder, there was NatWest. So there are different businesses that sometimes match fund. And I'll in the chat, I've just put a link to Crowdfunder. At the moment, if you aren't aware, Crowdfunder have got this £1.9 million of match funding from the National Emergencies Trust. So if you were thinking about crowdfunding, or you wonder if you should, or if you've got a campaign or a thing that you think you're going to struggle to fund in some other way, or you want to give it a go, now is a good time in the next year to be doing that, because this money's sitting there, and for every pound you raise, they match it basically. Certain milestones in your campaign. It's not for the faint-hearted. There are specific ways of doing it, like you need to have your first 20 to 30% done, and in the crowdfunding the first week, I would say, and you need to have a proper strategy for promoting this stuff. A good 80% of the, unless it's a crowdfund like Mark's just mentioned there, or you've got some big media endorsements and things going on, you normally will physically know a good 70 to 80% of the people who back your campaign. So there's no point doing one unless you've got a crowd to go to. The money just doesn't drop in your lap. You really have to work quite hard to get it. But if you're trying to push out a new service and you want to raise awareness of it, or you're championing a cause or campaign, and you want to get your hands on some money that people can't tell you what you have to do with it, crowdfunding is a really good route for that, and it builds a huge amount of goodwill amongst the people who have backed the thing, and it builds a sense of community as well. Even if you don't think you need one, actually every business needs a community these days. So sorry, Mark, what were you going to say?
No,
I was just going to say it helps if you do want to go down the crowdfunding route. It does help if you're on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and you're on pages. You know that sort of relates to what you're trying to do. You can join business pages.
You need to have, I recommend a really clear sort of pitch, and you can get people to help you with that, or you can just look. You can do your research into these sites and see. You can search for projects a bit like yours, or you can put in keywords to see who else has fundraised around this topic, theme, or area, and you can just learn from what you read. You can see what looks like a shocking campaign. You can see what raised no money. You can see what
that's the way of getting your crowdfunding bid out there. And and particularly if I, like you just said, if you're on like-minded pages, and it's a good way of saying, look, this is what I'm doing, and even if you just donate £5, lots of people do actually, so it's a way of getting your message out there.
And yeah, it's a really good market testing exercise as well for startups, because it forces you to get your act together. So I'm not suggesting, you know, what I will say is over the Christmas period, I mean, I've known people who have run them over the periods that traditionally you wouldn't, and they've still raised, you know, 50 grand just before Christmas. When you think, is everybody really going to back this campaign? You know, surely they've got other things going on, they're busy, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, just planning it well and seeking your advice is the thing I would say around that. We've talked a fair bit around wider fundraisers. I'm not going to spend loads of time on that. There's all sorts of ways that would work for individual stuff. We talked about commissioning. We're talking about evidencing your impact later. Ultimately, strengthening your bids can only be done through evidencing your impact, evidencing need, and giving, you know, killer stats around certain things, which we'll look at later. And sometimes some funders need a partnership or consortium approach. So some of the things that we've just talked about before we have a quick look at a couple of bids, you know, bids that have been successful, bids that haven't, and have a little think. I've called it a quick win trajectory, you know, from a standing start. So you're all on this trajectory more or less. So organisations like UnLtd, there are very few funders that will fund individuals. There's UnLtd, there's the Prince's Trust, which none of us fit in the ball pool for. There's certain kickstart monies in certain localities, often very small amounts of money. But it, you know, getting that first bit of cash to get you started from a funding organisation like one of these can be good. There are an awful lot of these things out there that make you jump through horrendous hoops. So these like Dragon's Den type things, I tend to stay well clear of those, because they can often be, they're good for building networks and building your confidence and building your presentation skills. But, you know, I tend not to steer down those routes. School for Social Entrepreneurs, we touched on earlier, again, they're for people who are either individuals, fairly early stage, and they offer support. We've just talked about crowdfunding. So those are some of the quick, for early stage funding that individuals can go for. Then people tend to sort of build on this. They tend to formalise themselves into some particular way. So UnLtd, School for Social Entrepreneurs and crowdfunding are options that you can look at if you aren't constituted, if you've not quite worked out how you're going to govern yourself. They'll take a risk on you, or you can set out your stall in such a way that you might be able to get some money through those means. But from there on in, they won't fund you unless, I say they, the funders, they won't fund you unless you've got some sort of governance model. And whilst we're not going to go through all of that today, as we said earlier, usually that means one of a few things. You've either got a minimum of 3 non-related people around a table to form something. So 3 non-related people who might set up a constitution as an unincorporated association, or 3 non-related people that might form a company limited by guarantee, with or without kick status, with or without charity status. Those are the usual routes, and we've all talked about this quite a bit, and I'm happy to talk people through where they're at and what they're trying to do to make sense of all of this. But basically, once you've got that constitution or that memorandum and articles association, or if you're setting up a co-op, you know, your rules, then you can, and there are other methods. There are limited liability partnerships and other things, but traditionally those, the first 2 that we mentioned, are the ones people go down. And you've got 2 signatories on a bank account, you're off and running. You know, it's those 2 things that you need in place. Don't get me wrong, you need a plan, you need to have budgeted for something, you need to have a clear, concise and relevant project, and we'll come on to some of that. But then you can start going to some of these people in green. So be it, you know, local neighbourhood grants, usually across every area in the land, there's usually a minimum of 10k that they're giving out a year across different projects, and it's not huge amounts of money, but there's building good relations with your sort of local council, neighbourhood area managers, or whatever they're called in your area, are a way into connections, if not cash out of them. And often getting some that backing through the council, you have to chip away at them for years before they'll take you seriously to do anything more than some, you know, scatter cash and small amounts of money. The CVS, we had Dave Bengi on from One Walsall the other day, and we were talking about Walsall, CVS there. You've got Dudley, you've got somewhere else we talked about. There's a few CVSs around and about where you are. You know, there's Birmingham, obviously, depending on where you're operating. Oh,
you've got Wolverhampton and Sandwell as well.
There you go, Wolverhampton and Sandwell. So yes, Palfrey and Walsall would love you to just go through them and go, but sometimes you've got a broader reach of what you're doing, or you're running something that makes sense across a wider area. And so these other CVSs and housing associations, slightly better, and these sorts of things might be places to go to. What else have we got? Awards for all. Yeah, the little glut of the next steps tends to be localized grants through your neighborhood stuff, CVS stuff, community foundation, we talked about, and I've got them on another slide. And then you sort of build your way up to going for an awards for all. And I think Ebony's on the line, and I think Ebony has had an awards for all, and it'd be great. We are going to look at some bids. I'm going to share some Flourish ones that we've written as some examples, and I know Marble Health wanted to have a look at one of theirs. If I'm happy to do it in the round, we can have a glance through, but I will come back one-to-one on some of that stuff.
Hi, Nicola. Yeah, I'm in the middle of applying again. Remember, I had a slight issue with getting directors on board.
Yeah.
So that was something that took me a while. So I'm sort of just like waiting. We did apply initially, but I applied for the one ahead of Awards for All.
And that communities, and it isn't worth, I'll be honest here, it's rarely worth applying for reaching communities until you've had an awards for all out of them. In some cases,
remember,
if you've been running 5 years or so, or if you're working in partnership with other people with a longer track record, going for reaching communities is an option, but it's rare that they'll give you a reaching communities of anything more than 10,000, which is their awards for all money anyway. To get going. And the beauty of it sounds awful, but the beauty of playing the lottery, and I don't mean buying the tickets, so buying those obviously helps. Playing the lottery means getting that first awards for all, and you use that awards for all to really build your knowledge and your capacity and your track record. There's a chicken and egg situation, and that's why they're in this middle bracket. What you have to do in order to really get awards for all money is to have evidence that there's a real community need for this thing that you want to do, and you have to have spoken to them. All too often in your early stage, you have this idea, you've spoken to your mates, there's a few people maybe through work or wherever else, and you think, oh, this is a good idea. That's not good enough for the lottery. They want to know that you've spoken to strangers, for want of a better word, that you've really made an effort to go out and do a proper bit of consultation or the feasibility. And some people, rightly or wrongly, they want to be paid for that. There's a good chance you have to do a bit of research off your own back before you get that money. But it's an easy fund to apply for, and it's constant. And the beauty of Awards for All is if they don't fund you, they'll give you a really clear letter telling you why you didn't get it, and you can apply within weeks, providing you fill the gaps. You can apply again and address those issues, or try, and they will talk to you, which is nice. A lot of funders have kind of battened down the hatches and won't speak to anybody, but so that's in the middle bracket there. And then there's others here. I just started to talk about the WEA I mentioned before, larger, the National Lottery Fund, 100k to 50k. That's more the reaching community stuff, which, as I've got, when you start evolving, you start to go bigger. So most of you would be in this quick win box. It's like, what are you tackling and what are you looking at within the quick win box? And then as you start evolving and you've built your track record, you've got a few years under your belt, and you've got evidence and services and testimonials, and you've talked to loads of people, or you've maybe done some really good impact evaluation work, you'll then be able to approach people like the lottery again for their reaching communities money. There's this thing called partnerships. So you might work in partnerships with others. They have a lottery partnerships bid. Some of you, and it's worth looking at, the Heritage Lottery Fund, oodles of money. And don't get me wrong, it's been tight, and the programs come and go, but there's a heritage angle on most things. Go on, Alpha.
Nicola, Walsall, they're struggling to get grants in, so they'll be more lenient if everyone applies to them. And they, like you said, they're really flexible.
Exactly. And there's a heritage angle on most things. For those of you that are working with older people, you might not want to do this. It might be a red herring. But one way around accessing that community is looking at, could you design a project, a storytelling project that would, bring out the stories of older people to capture you know, amazing insights, things that we would never know otherwise. It might be around a particular area, it might be around, you know, industry, it might be around the war, it might be around the fact that you've got, I don't know, whatever's pertinent and got a heritage angle in your area, or not, or it might be that you're working with people from South Asian backgrounds and physically focusing on South Asian heritage. There's a big push for a lot of that as well. So there's a storytelling project that you could tease out of your older people, and while they're telling you all these lovely stories about their history and their heritage, and you're turning it into art or a booklet or podcasts or whatever people want to turn their stories into, or an event or whatever, you're also asking them a million questions about how you want to design your service. So I'm just showing you how you can be creative with these funds and kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone, if that makes sense. So and likewise, you know, I can, you know, like Zuleika's doing food. There's nothing stopping Zuleika applying to the Heritage Lottery Fund to create some amazing, you know, cookbook about, you know, amazing recipes and stories from countries around the world. Plenty of other people have done it, you know, telling stories from 30 members of your community about their top recipes that mean something to them. You know, she can apply for 10 grand for that, you know, and you know, create the thing, but build her business model and understand how to make it all work and build trust with the people who might then buy from her in future. So you can actually have some quite good fun for this stuff. Initially, it sounds like sending you off piece, but actually it's giving you money to creatively find out how you want to build your business, if that makes sense. And likewise with families and young people, bit off piece for you, Deb, but again, intergenerational work and getting, you know, families or young people to whatever, community reporting skills and finding out about what the older generation think or whatever, or looking at the history of the education system, who knows, whatever floats your boat in terms of a project. The Heritage Lottery are not picky about the theme. They just want to see good, interesting and innovative projects work. And it's not all about, I don't mean this badly, it's not all about, you know, blokes around train stations or people around, I don't know, old heritage buildings. That they're after interesting and innovative ways to engage the communities more broadly on history and heritage and capturing, you know, what's been happening around the world. Go on, sorry, far away, Mark.
Well, I just had to defend those of us who like hovering around train stations.
Absolutely, me too.
Looking at trains. I mean, I think it's something we should all do, really. We'll all aspire to do. I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. Well, on that point, you might be interested to hear about Flourish. We've been offered the opportunity to take on a derelict floor within Heaton Chapel train station, which is near Stockport, near Manchester. So our first social enterprise office hub might be in a train station, or is likely to be, and so you never know how these heritage paths are going to take you. So we will be nobbling the Heritage Lottery at some point, and whilst we're helping the friends of Heaton Chapel Station do this, that and the other and think about things, we'll be using the opportunity for other things that we need to do as well. So just something to think about. I think we've talked a fair bit about housing associations and corporate stuff. We've talked a bit about commissioning routes. None of you are set up as charitable trusts yourself, but that doesn't mean that you can't go to charitable trusts for funding. So most charitable trusts will only fund charities. They're set up in a particular way, or they're quite old school and they've not reviewed and revised what they do, and they've not got their head around what the wider social enterprise and not-for-profit world looks like yet. That said, there's a vast number of them that have, and so it's, you know, there's oodles of them. And let me throw a few out, you know, Garfield Weston, Lankelly Chase, Paul Hamlin Foundation. Who else can we throw out? Who have I not said? Oh, there's just oodles of them. Tudor Trust, King's Fund. There's all sorts, and organisations like yours should be able to approach some of these organisations. And to be fair, One Warsaw and your local community foundations will be able to help you understand and look at what you've got locally. Does that make sense? So I've talked around the houses there on a few things. Anybody got any questions or anything to add, or a particular fund they wanted to mention? or you could put it in the chat. You know, feel free to share some of that stuff, or ask any quick questions before we start looking at a couple of things.
Okay,
I was just going to share this, just like with the sort of format with Unlimited, as that's coming to an end. I think things that have mentoring sort of latched onto it when you're starting out, for me, I found it invaluable, and I still do now.
Yeah.
So I think that's always a good idea, because
it's a really good
when you're looking at that, that wealth of information, having somebody like yourself to just be able to email or break it down, I think it's
a lot of these funders will just leave you alone and leave you to it, and when you're early at the stage of this, that might be daunting. So absolutely, I was flicking back to this other slide, because I used to, on this slide, I used to put, it's a different one now, but I would often put, you know, actually it's often the support that you get from some of these funders that's as valuable, if not more valuable, than the scratchy bit.
And you know another thing we found, Kayla. Oh, I can put a video on now. Sorry. It's like, you know, I should have left it off. you know, with the funding, there's been a few funds that I've picked up that I wasn't necessarily targeting, like the Black Minorities Fund, and sort of stuff like that. And I think having a look at where your niches are, where you might not be prioritizing on it, but you fall into that category. That's where we found this year, like, our biggest funding come from, and it's like kind of accidental, just because that's where the world's going to. Like, I don't know, like if you're in education and you're targeting more vulnerable and poverty-stricken students, there's like, you're going to get more chance of funding for that than just sort of being a tutoring service, or so that was something that I think I accidentally stumbled upon.
And it goes back to this slide that I've got up now around this sort of wider thinking around this stuff. Arfan, you got your hand up there.
Yes, I was going to say People's Health Trust Lottery Fund, People's Lottery, something like that it's called. But they also
People's Postcode Lottery.
That's the one. They give you the funding, but they also offer you a lot of different training sessions on project management, fundraising, budgeting, and things like that, which is quite good, really, because it kind of helps you through your project.
And if you're in certain areas and you're trying to regenerate certain areas, it's less relevant sort of for some of these projects. But there's Power to Change has been a funder that's been quite, but they're in quite key areas. And I don't think there's a huge focus where you are. But even if you're not in one of their sort of kind of hotspots of where they've been focusing around, there are funds and support and networks that come out as a part of that. Anybody else, anything they wanted to either query or add about some of that before we start looking at some bits?
Michaela?
Yeah?
Just thinking, you touched on it, you was talking about sponsorship, corporate sponsorship.
Yeah.
Do you have any more to say on that? Because obviously I know that Amazon have just got on board with the with the eco stuff.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not my area, is the first thing I'll say, and I tend to run from corporate sponsors, you know, like I'm on fire, because I've seen too many people get burnt by it. But I think all as I will say is have a look. I mean, so many large companies have corporate social responsibility targets to meet, and some of them have turned those into initiatives that they want to do. Some of them have turned them into strategic goals that they want to meet, and some of them have turned them into community fund stuff. So a lot of the banks have money, you know, Barclays, NatWest, Lloyd's backed the School for Social Entrepreneurs. Barclays and NatWest have their own sort of takes and things, and they do understand social enterprise to a point, and their funds are targeted in those areas. Those three banks in particular. Co-op Bank is another one where they have certain funds as well for this sort of world. So there are companies that have already gone down the route, and you're mentioning Amazon there. Often the best way to find out about these things is either follow them on Twitter or be looking at their websites to see what they're doing in their community or anything they've got available. I think where they can work for you, brilliant. I think it's just a case of working out, do our values and goals align with this company, and what are they wanting out of this relationship, basically. And, you know, give it a go. You know, getting the kudos and the backing and the endorsement from these sorts of companies can be very helpful. If it's significant amounts of money without loads of hoop jumping and faffing about, it can be helpful. if they're not forcing you to go, I mean, UnLtd do this and the School for Social Entrepreneurs do this, but and the Lloyds Bank stuff, if they're not forcing you to go to loads of flipping meetings and boot camps and residentials that you may or may not want to take part in, it's like what else have you got to do to get to be part of this thing, whether it's a program, accessing seed funding or mentoring or whatever else. I think there are so there's entry level ways into doing that, and then there's then there's the meeting with the big guns, isn't there, to get serious sponsorship opportunities pulled together. And I've personally not done that. I don't know if other people have got experience of that. We'll come find out in a sec, but I've seen cases where it's worked well and cases where it's not worked so well. And I think where you can find the right route in, you can find the right person, and you can, I'm sure there's a book online, I can't think of the name of it now, but there are books and there are directories that show you can pay, you can pay to find out who are the top 100 CSR managers in the country, so that you can go and nobble them, basically. There's things like that out there, but I would just be really wary of it. I
know I can get a direct route into Amazon. They do have a program for partnership, and they are big on mental health, inclusivity and things like that. So I just wondered if you thought there might be any pitfalls, and I'm really, really sorry, but Lewis is blowing kisses at you on the screen.
Can't see him, but I'll blow some back.
So
I probably sound like I'm putting a down on it, and I don't mean to. I think it's horses for courses, like I said, you've got to go and have a look, see if it feels right. I would really go on your gut feeling and your intuition with any of that corporate social responsibility partnership stuff. Does it feel like lip service? Does it feel like there's a genuine thing there? Is what you're doing really going to hit with their strategic goals? You've mentioned that they've got mental health and this, that, and the other. So long as you really align with what it is they say they want to do. The only other sort of caveat on this, where is I've seen 2 or 3 times now where small social enterprises, small, agile, highly innovative social enterprises have jumped into bed with these corporates, got a year or more, and that's the other thing, they love meetings, and it takes flipping ages to get a decision, actually getting the real thing happening. So it's a long game with one of these things. It's not just like a customer or like a sale or like a bit where I'd just quickly finally say, and then I'll come across that. The only other bit I would watch out on with this is that, like I was just about to say, I've known them work with social enterprises for so long, suck the lifeblood out of them and pay them nothing, and all out, dangle these carrots for 6 to 12 months, have it feel like it's as close as it's going to get, and they're like, oh no, and then within 6 months they've set up their own version of exactly what they've just ripped out.
It doesn't. I mean, what I'm thinking, it doesn't seem a good fit when you. I know you talked about banks, Lloyds banks, and things like that. As you know, obviously, Amazon, the connections I've got there. But I think that it just doesn't seem a good fit. I just know that they do have, for definite, they're really, really moving into mental health, and they want to come across as more caring. That's why they've done the eco thing, but it didn't feel right to me. I just wondered what you thought.
Well, let's chat again about it. I think for you and for anyone with older people, the options to get sponsorship for that stuff are quite large, because older people, have got the biggest spend power. Older people may or may not be digitally engaging wherever people are up to, so they might be not getting involved with what certain businesses. So and with a whole kind of aging society, there's a lot of hooks and handles where you would think corporates are wanting to get in with older people. So I think there'll be lots of scope to get sponsorship. It's just really, you've got to be really careful about, in any partnership, finding the right one. Sorry, Arfan, you'd had your hand up for a while, and so is Mark. So I'll just come to Arfan first and then Mark, that's right.
It was just a very quick one. In terms of CSR, there's one side is funding side, the other side is getting them to come out and do stuff for you. So their staff give a couple of hours a year to projects in the community. So you can make it really specific to what you need and get them out. And that's probably the easiest way to work with them. So that's what I was going to say around CSR.
Cool. No, that's a good point. It's and what you'll find is, don't go to them for money initially. You're not going for money. Just a very quick tale before coming to Mark. I've probably said it before. One of the most successful things I heard once was a guy down in Newham, where the Olympics was a good while back, well before all of that. He was a local pastor, and in this area there's absolutely nothing there. Before the Olympics regenerated the place, they were struggling to get food. There was no shops within a certain mile radius. It was quite a dire situation, and this guy had set up this. It's one of those kind of food vans where he was taking around like a mini shop in a mini little van was what he was trying to do, and they set this stuff up in a community centre, distributing food, selling food and all sorts to help hard up families. And Tate and Lyle were a local business sitting there, and he didn't go into Tate and Lyle and say, we really need some money, can you help us, because they'd have just gone, thank you, but no thank you. What he went in with is that we're running this community project, and we're doing all right with it, but we're not marketeers, and we could really do with some marketing support. Is there anybody in your marketing team who might give us some guidance and mentor us? That's your best route in, because within the first meeting, they've learned your whole story, they've fallen in love with the idea of it, and within months they'd given him 2 vans and the load of storage space within their warehouse facilities. So it's just thinking about your ask and thinking about your kind of creative way to evolve a relationship so that you don't get doors in your face with different ways. But sorry, Mark, to keep you waiting there. What were you going to say? Yeah,
just quickly following on from what folks have been saying about sponsorship from local organisations. I'm sure there's something around what Amazon could do for us. They're relatively local. There's our local co-ops. They often have a social enterprise social support program, and then there's places like HomeServe who serve elderly and general population as well. There might be something there. And I was interested listening to a financial services program the other day where there was a very clever enterprising person who was saying that the pension funds have got a tremendous amount of power now with companies who down the line might want finance for a whole range of things. And I don't know whether you've got any experience in understanding what the pension funds are saying to companies about needing to ratchet up their social responsibility and their green compliance agenda.
It's a good point, and it's not one I've got knowledge on, although it's made me think around things like social investment tax relief, what you're saying there. So on the pension side and particular agendas and so forth, there'll be reports out there, and two pension companies that I've worked with before who've come out and done CSR stuff and pro bono stuff are Scottish Widows have come out and done stuff with us before, and they're quite clued up around certain things. And trying to think who the other one was. There was another one. Oh, it's the one I'm with. I can't remember it. Standard Life. So I think they're more approachable than you think, actually, and they'll come out and do stuff. And it's at that point, they're quite generous with what they'll share, and they'll have researched, as you say, and thought about an awful lot more than you'd imagine. So actually pension companies could well be, but especially for older people as well, a really good partner around some of this stuff.
And Triodos Bank, that Dutch social enterprise supporting bank, have you had any dealings with them at all over the years?
Yeah, there's Triodos, there's Charity Bank, there's a few of them. They're fairly well reputed. They're quite slow, and they've got quite small staff teams, so they've not got huge capacity.
But does it help to be a customer? I just happen to be a customer of Triodos. I have been for about 10 years now.
Yeah.
Do they smile more benevolently on long-standing customers, or is that just a bit cheeky to say?
So go find out and report back. I don't know.
Yeah, good answer, thank you.
But they should be, go see, and hopefully, I mean, they come out to events and they do various things, and they want to be seen to be doing the right thing. There's a caveat on everything at the minute, isn't there, that over the last year and through the pandemic, people have adapted and changed the way they want to work. And for some, they've gone all guns blazing and they've got more capacity, and Zoom's really helping them engage more than they ever would. And for some, they're just, oh no, everyone's working from home. Oh no, I can't get, you know, so it's, sooner you call them, the sooner you'll see what's their line of communication in terms of follow up and thinking about, you know, innovative ideas or thinking about backing things in different ways.
Okay, thank you.
Have you still got your hand up, Arfan, or was that from before? I wasn't sure. It mentioned Walsall Football Club then. Absolutely. Football clubs are actually a great CSR partner. I would, as much as I've run a mile from some, the football clubs, when you find the right one, they are very clued up on this, and they've been doing it for years, and some better than others, but it's part of all of their agenda. And actually some of the smaller football clubs are well outperforming some of the larger, more sort of Premier League type ones. So football clubs are a good place to go, because particularly if you're working with young people or health and well-being or active aging type stuff, and some of them got quite environmental goals as well. Sorry, Arfan, go on.
Even elderly people, because they do this walking football. I'm not too sure what it is, but Walsall Football Club do that. And then the other one for us in Walsall is the university campus. It's a campus for teachers training and for health and social care. So they could even give placements, student placements. So that's a good one to get in touch with.
Definitely. I'm conscious of time, and I'm just checking how people are. What I was going to do was whiz through a few bids just to show you differences and comparisons. I think rather than work through an individual kind of one, because I'll come back with you guys, Safina and Zabina, to kind of work through yours specifically. I have got it here and I will pull it up, just an example, but I was going to work through some like a variety, so you can see the different styles of these things that might help people who've done it before, but also might help people who haven't, to see like this trajectory that I've talked about and the style of application and the style of forms that crop up in the future. So partly to take the fear and the mystique out of it, and partly to freak you out probably when you start looking at what's involved. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I think it stopped me anyway because I've opened too many screens, but I'm just stacking up a load of if we take a break just after 12:30, it should give us time to rattle through a few applications, and I can just show you a few formats, and we can think about what do you need to have in place to be looking at this sort of stuff. Hopefully that's all right for people. So I just want to open one more document, so I've got them all there, and then I think I'm sorted. Here it is, last but not least. So what I've got for you here, because I didn't want to sort of really share too much of Marble Health sort of inner workings, you know, in front of everybody, although I am looking at a couple of bids with them, and I have for a few people that have been supported, been trying to review things and look at stuff. What I've got here that I'll show you for starters is I'll go back to screen share and pick a bid, any bid. So we're going to start with an awards for all bid, because that's the one where we've talked about these things more. What would probably be helpful, actually, before I show you the bid, I know Ebony's looked at this, but I think other people perhaps haven't yet. Before we look at the bid, let's look at how you find this bid. So just bear with me while I get another awards. What we said, awards for all. Here we go. So when I screen share now, it should bring you onto my internet, and then you'll see what I'm on about. Just thought, you know, whenever you're applying for funding, the key thing with any of this stuff is if you don't meet the criteria, why waste your time applying? So it's always key. That's why I'm thinking it's quite easy to find. National Lottery, Awards for All England, how to get a grant of up to £10,000. So it's quite straightforward. Can everybody see that? I think you can. And so as it says here, you can apply for 300 to 10,000. What I would say is, why apply for 300? You know, in the main, I wouldn't be bothering with Awards for All unless you're going for over five grand, because there's too many other small grants to go for. And I'd be aiming nearer the full amount for Awards for All. And I know when you're new, you might not want to handle £10,000 just yet, but you know, it's amazing how quickly these things get spent, isn't it, once you start putting a budget together. So the whole point of Awards for All, and not every funder you find will be setting out their stall around what it is they're looking for, you know. So in this case, they want you to continue to deliver activity that might be around COVID stuff. They become very COVID response, or they might be looking at how you to change and adapt and be more resilient to new and future challenges. So they have changed the way they've been considering bids, and they've still got quite an eye on those applications that are tackling COVID in some way. So the more that you can be addressing the needs or the evolving and changing needs through the pandemic, this particular fund are more interested in that than, let's say, just popping up any old new, you know, heritage project, let's say, or any new sports project that's got nothing to do with COVID. I don't know. Basically, the more you can show that you're demonstrating an impact against tackling the evolving needs of COVID, the better, which I think most of you can. And then in order to support, you know, these priorities here, building strong relationships in and across communities, improving the spaces and places that matter, and to help more people reach their potential by getting to the earliest possible stage. Those are their strategic priorities. That's what when they're looking at your application, they're really thinking, how are you going to address these things? How is this, you know, if you aren't doing one or three of these things, then you won't score very highly for them. And at first glance, it looks like, oh, brilliant, I can describe how we do that. But as they're saying here, having to make some tough choices. It's normally sort of an 8 to 12 week turnaround for the lottery. But the beauty of it is, as we've said, it's ongoing. I'm not going to go through all of this because some of you will have looked at this stuff before, but with the lottery, as with lots of funders these days, you have to kind of log into their portal and apply online. And the golden rule of thumb with this is whatever you're putting in there, keep saving it through the system, and ideally save it in a Word document. Not only so that if the system goes down, you've not lost everything and you start pulling your hair out, but also so that you've got that content there for the future, for your future marketing, for a future bid, for whatever else. So I just wanted to show you how to find that. And there are more criteria and there are more things. And I would say most of these funders give you loads of useful information as to exactly how to apply. And I really would try and follow what they're asking for by the letter. And that makes it complicated to be cutting and pasting, because often what you wrote for one funder isn't quite the right style or isn't quite the right order for what another funder wants, which gets frustrating. But the more content you've got, the more you can juggle what you've got. And sometimes it's just a case, the deadline's coming, you just got to get something in there and hope that that they want to back what you've got to say. But like I say, our time is precious, so the more you can create a neat fit with a particular funder rather than a wing and a prayer, you'll find you get very frustrated with lots of rejections and lots of time and energy spent and not a lot back for it. So it's just something to bear in mind. I know I'm quite pleased to say that through the pandemic, I've physically, or Flourish, mainly me, physically supported over 30 people to apply for all sorts of funds, and we've been tallying it all up, reporting for our own purposes. We've helped raise almost £1 million for over 30 groups in the last year, which is quite staggering to me. So anybody can do this, and they're all very diverse sort of groups, and you've just got to give it a go. So now we've seen where to find this thing, I was just going to quickly show you an example of one of these, and as I say, rather than run through what Marble Health have sent me to review lately, I was going to show you a Flourish one, because then you'll be able to compare it and contrast it against your own Safida and Zabina, and we're not giving away all your trade secrets. So here we have it. So this, like Ebony, we had an awards for all, and then we've had a second one, and that is the beauty of it. They want you to progress, they want to capacity build, they want to see you evolve. So quite often you'll have an awards for all to do some early stage stuff, and they're quite used to organisations going back to them a year or two later, either for a new aspect to further capacity build what they're doing, or to evolve something in some way. So do bear that in mind. So I've not given you the whole form here, but I've just given you the nuts and bolts. So they'll ask you a question like, who are you? Tell me more about your organisation. And here, I think the point is, it's being really specific, and it's a right pain in the backside, because there's these word counts that those of you who've written bids will be like, I've become an expert at fitting things and fettling things to fit in word counts, but I'm, you know, I can't do a crossword, but I can do this. You know, we were all geeks in our own way, aren't we, about different things. So this is quite succinct. I hope you'll see that, you know, we're saying you have to get a lot across in a very short space of time, and we're going to look at that in a bit. I've got some tools to help you look at that after lunch. So you know, we're saying, we're giving them 4 key points, you know, what our 4 key aims are, and we're packing quite a lot in there to tell them what it is we do, what we're about. Building, you know, you really have to get across what the need of your organisation is, and saying, you know, we think this is needed, we've spoken to a few people, our community says, isn't going to be enough for the lottery. And so you'll see here, might look quite different to funding bids you might have written yourself. Whoever's had a go at these yet, you know, we're saying that the needs, you know, it's based on, you know, on our own opinion. Basically, our own opinion is, you know, women make great leaders. You know, opinion alone isn't going to cut it with a lottery. So then we have to tell them what the wider world is saying. So we've gone away, and I'll show you how to do this later, to find some statistics, like killer stats, I call them. What are your top 5, top 10 killer stats? That might be from a national report, it might be from a local authority, it might be from a sector-specific policy report. There's loads out there, and I'll show you where these things are. So we've cobbled together, as you'll see here, a whole bunch of data and stats that really tries to explain what research shows as to why there's a need for us to support women in this way. It took us 2 years to figure this out, because we did get a few rejections, and people go, so why is this important? Why, you know, people would ask us all the time, and you take it for granted that you know what you're doing and why, and you know it's working, so you get a bit like, ugh. And it's not until you kind of start to look at your theory of change model, which I've got a template for, that you start to think, well, actually, how do we communicate this? How do we know there's this need? Why is this so important? Because for most of us, it's like a hunch or a gut feeling, or we're living it. So we've not got all these stats that roll off our tongue. So hopefully this is giving you a sense of the level of statistics that funders like to see, that even the lottery for just 10k want to see, in order for them to go, you know your stuff, you've done your research, gosh, this is quite a challenge, we need to back this. And it's thinking through how you're going to get that across in, you know, a couple of 100 words with some killer stats, and still getting your points across. So hopefully that's given you, I'm not going to read that, you'll have had a chance to glance at a million statistics there, but that's what they want to see. And then in our application here, you know, we've said that, just put this over here, you know, we said what we've done with our, last year we done an awards for to do this, that, and the other. So the point in this, for people who might be writing funding bids and thinking, what do we need to include? Time after time, there's 2 or 3 reasons bids get rejected. It's either because you've not got those killer stats, or you've not done the wider research, or you've not shown what the national agenda is on this. And the other reason is you've not been specific enough about what it is you're physically going to do, or what the impact is that you've physically had. If the responses in the boxes feel a bit woolly, if there's not enough content there that shows them exactly in a smart, objective, you know, specific, measurable, achievable, time bound, you know, they really want you to pin, even if, I shouldn't say this out loud, even if you're making it up, even if you don't know if you're really going to do that, even if, you know, things might change, you know, you're far better saying, you know, with this money, we're gonna run a quarterly event that does this, that, and the other, that's going to reach, you know, 150 people, or whatever your measurable things are, that says how many we're going to do, who they're with, what's going to happen, what you hope to see change as a result. That's what they want to know. And so that's how you've got to be sort of punchy around this stuff. So you'll be seeing in here how we outlined to them how we're going to use this money. So we're telling them we're going to create 4 sector showcasing activities, how many people are going to benefit. We're telling them, you know, another program that we're going to run that's going to reach 50 social leaders. We're going to increase our presence through social media, blah, 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 reach new audiences. and we're going to continue to strengthen our social value research. So basically, those bullet points that we've got there, whatever you're saying in the form has to directly correlate with what the budget is saying. So that's another thing where people fall down. They say they want to do all of these things. You see, oh God, there's more. God, we did a lot with that money, So all of these things, these bullet points, directly correlate to the budget basically that we put in there. So the money that we were asking for directly related to, room hire for these things. If we were, refreshments for holding these things, paying somebody to help us with our social media. Paying somebody to deliver social value research. What people forget about Awards for All is they aren't just a project funder. People think that, oh, it's a project. I have to create a project and apply towards for a project. Not true. And I think you'd be wasting the opportunity if that's how you approached it. One of the Awards for All are one of the few funders that will fund capacity building within an organisation. So, strengthening the way your staff team works, strengthening your business planning and strategic development, strengthening your governance, things that you can't normally put in a project funded bid, you can put into these. So I just mentioned that so that when you're applying for your money, even if you think you don't need £10,000 to run your project, you might only spend 5k delivering activities, but you might spend, like here, this point, we're going to develop a proposition for wider income generation activities, including consultancy, program design, merchandising, and pilot targeted projects. So that was money for us to just have a go and mess about and come up with some business cases for how we might take this thing forward. Awards for All are used to funding that sort of stuff. They want to see that you're going to be sustainable in the long run. And if you're only going to run a project for like 50 people and that's it, and you can't show them where the money is coming from to build progress beyond this, they might get wary as well. So it's actually helpful to build in your sustainability planning costs, because it shows that you're not just a one-off project. Deb's got a hand up. Fire away.
Oh, sorry, it's
Mark, go for it.
And yeah, it was just a quick query about, and you're probably going to come on to it in a bit anyway, so sorry if I've interrupted.
No, far away.
Do you have to pay the money back if for whatever reason that there's you become ill, or that there's a problem in the family or whatever?
Okay. So like any funder, like UnLtd now, there's a couple of the 11 projects that we funded that haven't quite been able to make things work in the time frame that they'd planned, or they've had some setbacks and it's held them up and delayed things. Most funders will bend over backwards to try and give you leeway, whether it's time, whether it's swapping and changing things around, whether it's rehashing the budget to do something. Certainly these small grants, they don't want to claim this money back at all. However, if things go awry, if you can't do the thing, if everything goes wrong, they can claim the money back, but they'll usually work as hard as they can to make sure they don't have to, because it's a faff for them to have to reclaim the money and raise another order to claim the money back, and it's a pain for them to take the money back. I don't know if that answers your question. But in very exceptional circumstances, and normally, not the lottery, actually, they'll pay you 80% up front and 20% at the end, or they sometimes pay you all in one go. It's a bit nuts for 10k, but usually I'm sure it's you get a good chunk, 80% up front, and your final payment once you finish a few bits might be 20%. I'm sure over the last year through COVID, they've just given everybody the money up front. Likewise, Groundworks, another bit I'm quickly going to show you in a minute, they have a similar thing. They chop it into chunks. Like UnLtd chops it into at least 2, if not 3 or 4 installments. It means that you hit certain milestones, or you create an interim report or whatever it might be to release the next bit. Usually if your fund's over £2,000 or £3,000 or £4,000, there's a good chance your funder's going to chop it in half or chop it into chunks. The Awards for All don't do that, and you get most of your money up front. So you run yourself a bit more at risk that if you get ill, something goes wrong, whatever. But most of these funders, they want you to deliver within a time frame. Usually it's a good 6 to 12 months or more, and most funders are expecting a handful of the people that they give money to have delays, life kicks in, things don't necessarily happen quite within the 12-month period, so they have to kind of extend it. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes.
Great. So yeah, hopefully it's helpful seeing the language written down here, and I'm happy to just, I'm forever emailing bids to people just to show them, copy what you want, or not copy, but do you know what I mean? You kind of use this as a template, or a few of them, and you hash it, you just reword it to kind of fit what it is you want to say. And there's nothing to say that just because this bid got funded, a slightly rehashed one is definitely going to get funded, because things get competitive, don't they? But we will often share bids with people so they can just either digest the way it's been written or rehash it into their own stats and their own phrases. You'll see what the budget said there. It might shock and alarm people, what you can charge. People think, oh God, I've got to save money, I can't charge this, it's got to be but they're quite used to seeing people paying 250 to 500 pounds a day for somebody's time to do something. Be that specialists, experts, teachers, facilitators, trainers, whatever, that it's not unusual. And it might be that you can work for cheaper than that or whatever, and you would rather only bill for 250 pounds a day or 150 pounds a day and spend more money on something else, some kit or some piece of equipment or whatever. So you juggle your budget however you see fit. This is just an example, but there's my sort of rehashing of it all once we got it. But that does that give you a flavour of things? And I was just going to come to Safina or Zabina, and just, like I say, I'm not going to whiz through yours in its entirety, but looking at this and thinking about your application as it stands at the moment, my top tips would be, let's go away and find some really punchy national statistics around older people's care and the crisis, and how much you could save the public purse by just doing such and such. Or the population of Warsaw and the percentage that are over 60, and the percentage of those that are needing X, Y, and Z, or how many people are struggling to basically finding some reports that give you some punchy data. Because I think the way you want to run your project is there in the main. It just needs some numbers, some numbers in terms of aims and outcomes, and to report back on, and some numbers in terms of data and stats is my sort of main tips on all of that. I don't know whether you've got any thoughts or comments there, Sabina.
Yeah, no, that's quite useful actually, Nicola, because we had actually found some national statistics ourselves generally. It's actually how you sell those statistics in the wording, isn't it?
Exactly.
To see what the impact of your project or support or service will be.
Yes.
So we did find something like public health and national data and stuff like that, but being able to just use, like you said, the ones that are going to be really catchy and very relevant, and keeping it. The word count was the hardest bit for us actually, because we had lots of information. Yeah.
So yeah, it's always the way with those. Conscious of time, I'm just gonna stop. I'm gonna stop sharing this. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing this. Just whiz through a couple more, because I don't want to bore you with this, and you may well have had enough already. And if you just need a breather, that's fine. I was just gonna show you the housing association bid. So these can be a little bit more fiddly, but and this was in partnership with Groundwork, and there are various Groundwork funds that come up throughout the year. Groundwork, Comic Relief, they've got this online portal that you fill all this stuff in. So
is Groundwork open to the whole country?
Yes. They have some localized stuff, but then they have others that aren't. The one I'm showing you here isn't open to the whole country. It was just specific, but I brought it up because it was with Clarion Housing, and I've gone away and I know people at Clarion Housing, and I've checked. Clarion Housing do have a footprint across Warsaw. And so they have tenants and residents in and around within a radius of where you are, and which means that for certain people running stuff, which is most of you actually, unless you're like, just depends, but basically there may well be some of you that can approach Clarion Housing as an example. There'll be other housing associations, but we've got an in there with them, and they've also got an interest around active aging, and interest around young people, and a lot of their priorities tick boxes with the priorities of some of the members of the award winner sort of group. So just a whistle stop one here. So this was, it's not Flourish, it's my other sort of project, like an enterprise project around it. It's called Pop-Up Spa and Retreat. And so you'll just see, you know, it's a bit more lengthy and there's a lot more in there, but I just wanted you to see a different style. So I'll kind of scramble through. Some of it's yes, no, maybe type answers, and how many people are this, that, and the other, and how many people volunteer. So it's worth just, when I talk about a bid canvas, it's worth having some of this key information down in a place, because what happens is funding applications, you'll all know, they come, the deadline's like yesterday, and there's no capacity to actually put anything together. And what's helped us at Flourish in recent times or recent years is, now we've written a few of these things, or you know, we know what we're doing. We certainly help lots of other people. We just have no time for ourselves. The way I can now delegate this to other people is by having, I've got like a toolkit where all of our, I'll show you, I've got a summary of this, but all of the basic information needed is there, and I can now delegate bid writing a lot easier than I ever could, because I've got the information stored and prepared. So there is a summary of what that needs to be in a minute. So you get all this, you know, the usual just standard stuff. Who are you, what are your details, and all of that sort of stuff. And then the project location. And so we're saying we were going to run some pop-up spa events and a fast track training course, is how it was worded. And then you kind of rattle on about where it's going to be and what's going to happen. What is all this? And again, some of them, you know, it's a million questions, and you just have to yes, no, maybe, or put not applicable. So again, this is quite specific, you know, in saying we'd like to do this, we'd like to do that. You have to really be specific, you know. So, you know, we're saying we run 6 monthly pop-up spa and wellbeing events at their community centres, you know, to make holistic health and wellbeing accessible to tenants and residents. And we're going to work with this particular organisation that already works with Clarion Housing, carry out, you know, stakeholder engagement activities, market research, identify health inequalities and needs. You know, you could very easily repurpose this, basically, Marble Health and others that might have ways of working with their tenants. And at the time, what we wanted to do, they were quite keen on skills building and quite keen on qualifications and stuff. And so we've got it within our gift to be able to run holistic therapy training programs. And so that's what this bid was for, is to run some outreach events. So basically Flourish actually benefited from this. So we ran a series of events, health and wellbeing events in the community that were funded, that we could scoop up loads of women running social enterprises, talk about loads of challenging subjects, and, you know, learn what the needs in the community are to help everybody design what they want to do in future. And also scoop up a whole bunch of people in the community who perhaps wanted to come on a holistic therapy training program. So we were always killing 2 or 3 birds with one stone when we're going out there. So this just gives you the specifics, you know, but you could be running, you know, 6 social activities with 25 to 35 people, you know, and we're going to be, and you're not necessarily going to be doing this, but you're going to be giving people a voice to shape future services. You're going to be, I don't know, you know, this will come up with what it is, or you'll already know, but, you know, it's a very tweakable bid, this, you know, and it's quite a standard style for some funders. They have their own targets that they're wanting to tick. So, for example, the Clarion Housing, you know, we were ticking community engagement, we were ticking education and skills, and we were ticking health and well-being. So there's always a list of more than that. They want to see exactly what is it you're going to deliver outcomes against for them. How long is it going to take? Blah, blah, blah. Again, project need. There's less stats in this. I didn't have them to hand, you know, and I still probably need to go away and do my research in some of this, but we got away with, you know, saying, you know, what we generally knew in this case. You know, we were talking about people who were just about managing or not managing financially, trying to come off benefits. And the idea was that we can help fast track people into careers in holistic health. And we trained up about 10 people on a course. And I know at least 3 or 4 of them who went into this as a career pathway, and some of them we're still buying now to do therapy treatments at some of our events. So that's all more impact that we can use. And we already have, off of the back of this, I've won another £20,000 WEA contract just recently. So we're running this again, but much bigger and in a much more interesting way, actually. But so one bid does lead to another, providing you run them well, you take the learning and you gather the data of what's happened. So I'm not going to bore you with too much more of this. I think you get the gist. You know, the awards for all is quite straightforward in comparison. There's only a handful of questions, and in others you'll find it's just endless. So I'm just, you know, it's a long one, it's not fun, but it's not rocket science either, I guess is the point of that one. And then just very quickly, last but not least, to fry your minds before we take a break, and I think Anne in theory is going to join us as well, before we do the last hour on impact evaluation. She says, where is it? Just one more. Sorry if I'm kind of boring you rigid. This is just another one that's a bit more hefty, but this was a £20,000 one. This is for Flourish, not for Pop-Up Spa Retreat. But I just want to show you a different example. So ESF money, or money that's around building skills and capacity. You know, this was part government funding, part local money, and part European money, basically, that's being given out through the WEA. This is just an example, and as I say, I can forward this to people so they can see it. Some of you are a little way off this, but it's worth just seeing. You know, again, a lot of this stuff is repeat, rinse and repeat. So a lot of the, what are the main activities of your organisation, for example, is the question. Who benefits from these? You know, so again, because we've done our research and we know who we're working with, and we've surveyed, you know, hundreds of people that we work with over time, we know exactly who we're working with. We can tell on the stats, and the stats are quite shocking, actually. And that's goes in our favour, because not only can the funder see that we are genuinely working with people who need, you know, this subsidy and this support, but we can also show that we're actually moving people along, and that, you know, although they might start, you know, with us and they're only earning 10k or less a year, by the end of it, you know, they're all on a better trajectory, or have got increased economic independence and that sort of thing. So again, quite specific and quite stats heavy, which is what these funders like to see. And it's chicken and egg. Until you've worked with some people, you can't tell them who it is you're working with. But you can use the Office of National Statistics, and you can use the census, and you can use other places to tell them, to the best of your ability, who it is you're working with and what's affecting them. I'm not going to go through all of this, it'll hurt your eyes. I'm happy to share these and send them as examples that you can look at your leisure. But it was just showing you again that this is a long, look, 21 pages, oof, you know, so this is what you work your way up to. But this is probably a good one for sort of Ebony, as she's sort of thinking, where am I going next? What have I got to do? We've been quite specific. Often, if it's been funded by a certain agency, like here, the GMCA, and you've got your West Midlands Combined Authority, will have similar opportunities. These are the sorts of, you know, they'll want to know, how does your proposal support our work and skills strategy? So have you even looked at the health and wellbeing strategy, or the work and skills strategy, or the brighter futures strategy, or whatever it's called, in your, you know, inclusive economy strategy? You know, these combined authorities put all these reports together. They tell you exactly what it is they're trying to do. It's just nobody knows these things exist. So anyway, I will send this out but you'll see again, it's more quite succinct, specifically exactly what we're going to do. 3 inspiration events, 25 career coaching places. That, you know, it's not guesstimates. It's like you've planned this out, and you know exactly what you're asking for, and you know exactly what it's going to cost to run type stuff. And in this one, again, they're really very thorough around who are you working with, and why do they need this, and how are they affected in such a way that they need your support. So I won't, you know, for every group of people that we work with, this forced us to pull together stats and something to say about who we're working with, you know, be they unemployed, be they single parents, be they people over 50, be they people from diverse, you know, ethnic groups, be they people with disabilities. So it's just worth thinking about who exactly is it that you're benefiting and why do they need what you need. And this takes time to pull together, to be fair, but once you've got it, it's like gold and you can just keep using it. So I probably said enough for now. I think we need to take a break and get some lunch. And when we come back, I will show you we'll try and do 2 things, she says, in the last 45 minutes. We'll try and look at a whistle stop on social value and also how you find this data. Where does it come from? So that you don't have to, you'll do your research, but you'll also rely on the research that already exists once you know where to find it. So I'm going to leave. There's this, I'm not going to tell you this, you'll get the slides. There's a how not to write a funding bid slide. And then there's things to have ready and prepared in order to respond. And that's all of your basic information about your organisation that's just sitting there. And then it's, knowing that you've got financial accounts. And if you haven't got financial accounts, some sort of income and expenditure, certain funders are going to want to see once you get past your first little bit of seed funding. They're going to want to see certain policy documents. So the WEA and groundwork wanted health and safety, equality and diversity, volunteers, safeguarding. I've got examples and templates for all of this stuff. They're not hard to put together. They're all there. And what I would say is you can have the best policies in the world, but if nobody's read them and your new team or your new board members don't know they exist, you need to make sure you're building in time for people to know what's your standpoint on everything. Other things that you might have in your toolkit to draw on is things like social value data and other PETL reports and other links to information that will help you strengthen your cases. So that's what I'm suggesting, things to have. Deborah's had a hand, or Mark has had a hand up for a little while, so I'm just gonna see if there's a question there.
Nicola, I know you said earlier you're not too keen on Dragon's Den type scenarios, but I think I'm going to christen you Nick the Magic Dragon after this, because you do just seem to know how to turn ideas into something more real. But my question is, do you at Flourish do it the other way around sometimes? You're on top of the facts and figures and the social geography over the areas that you're now building up pictures for. You know it from working with people. You also know it through research. Do you go out to folks and say, don't do that stone painting project? You'd be better off doing, maybe with your expertise, because I know you a little bit now through your application form for painting stone projects. Here's an oven ready project around issues for your particular area as we understand it. Or does it all have to come really from the grassroots up? Or can you fly about as magic dragons? And
well, so I think what you're saying is, sometimes it can be hard for communities if they're not galvanized, or if they don't know each other, or if there are clashes, or you've not got a cohesive community, or whatever it is, or people just perhaps haven't got the skills and confidence to do certain things, then absolutely going in and running inspiration events. I'd hate to go in and say, oh, you shouldn't do this, you should do that. Coaching people into ways of working what's best for them, but sometimes people just don't know. They're kind of scratching their head thinking, and sometimes they need some case studies, or they need some practical examples, or like you say, oven ready project ideas. I'd love to do more of that. I think I remember years ago, because we've met so many brilliant social enterprises that are viable, one of my projects for the future, which I thought of this 5-6 years ago, but I've not had time to do it. What I'd love to do is create a program where we find a load of money, and it's almost about recruiting the right social leaders. So we might have a tool bag. Here's 5 or 6 projects. Here's 5 or 6 social enterprise models that we know work. And we've got mentors and people who've been there and done it. Come and, apply to be a project lead or a social business development manager on this project. So there's ways we can do all of that stuff, but we haven't done yet, because scratching your head to find the right funder who would take a risk on that kind of project is hard. Now we've built our track record up, I feel a bit more confident that we've got business models that we could at least have a range of 5 or 6 business models. You know, there's a social enterprise cafe, there's a social enterprise market, Leamington Market, there's health and wellbeing related businesses, there's social enterprise training, education and tutoring businesses. So whatever it is, there's example models, and there's a team of people who've done that kind of thing before who need to be paid to sort of share their expertise and stuff. They're sitting there now. We'd probably go to Joseph Rowntree Trust or Esme Fairbairn for that kind of initiative. So we'll have something I've thought of. It's just one in the pipeline. Okay, I'll volunteer to carry your bags if you ever do anything. Thank you. Let's yeah, well, let's give it a whirl. There's yeah, for sure. A little bit of sleep and then we'll carry on. But I hope I've not bored people rigid there. I know I've talked to you a lot in the last hour, but you don't know what you don't know, and you can. I'm not suggesting that we know it all by any means, because I've had bids rejected, you know, but like it says on this thing here. Oh no, it doesn't say it there. Never mind. There's definitely a slide somewhere where, you know, we've had bids rejected, and it's like, try not to get too deflated. It's just what happens, and you use that learning. So I'm looking for it. You use that learning in with the next one. And just because your bid didn't get written, this is what I've said to Safina and Zarina, just because your bid didn't get funded doesn't mean it wasn't a good project, it wasn't a good bid. It just, in comparison to the other things that they were looking to fund, or their criteria, or just the competition in the pool, you know, it was the way the cookie crumbled at that point. So re-looking at the content that you've written, looking at how you can beef it up, as we've said, with different stats, more tangible specifics around the outcomes that you hope. It will help you actually, you know, so you know exactly, we're running these 3 events over the next 6 months, and they're going to have 20 people at them, and they're going to achieve this, and we hope by the end of it the community will have evolved in these ways, you know. Then you've got something to kind of measure against, which is what we'll come back to. So let's have a breather. Should we take till, if we take till, I know it doesn't sound very long, but 15:15, do you want 20 minutes? Will that work to just get us something to eat a little bit, or come back and whatnot? If I show you what I'm going to try and cover next, which isn't going to fit in the time, there's 2 key things I want to cover, and we can, you know, there's time to do more of this, or there's time to have another session before the end of November or December or whatever. I'd want to spend a little bit of time helping you know and learn where to find this information that I keep talking about. Where do you find this stuff, and what's going to help you? I'm not going to go too much on plans and SWOT analysis and all of this stuff, because we have done these things, and there's webinars I can send you again, and, you know, business model canvas. I'm not going to spend loads of time on that, because it's quite simple. It's a tool, you just use it. So my time really, we'll spend a bit of time looking at where you find the policy data, and then we'll spend the rest of the time, a good 25 minutes ish, on all of this. What is this social value nonsense, and why should we care? And even if it's only an idea, not to scare you, but just to see why it's so important, and how to make it easy for yourself is kind of what I want to try and do. So that's what we'll try and cover shortly. Does that sound okay? Okay, yeah, good. And I think when we get back, just so I'm not talking at you again with different things, I'll put you into a couple of breakout rooms so that you can have a chit chat with whoever's there. So we'll come, once we know everyone's on camera, I'll set up 2 breakout groups, just small ones, and you can get to meet some other people and have a chat. At the minute, I'm thinking I'm going to put Ebony and Deb in one, and Safina and Emma, if she's still there, in another, just so you've had a chance to say hello to somebody. Awesome. So let's meet back just after 15:15. I'll set up the breakout rooms at 15:15. I'm sorry, it's like pummeling it here. Zoom's not the best place to be sitting, staring and trying to take information in. So let's have a breather. We'll come back in 15 minutes or so. I'll set up the breakout room so that you can have a chat for, I'm afraid it's only every 5 minutes or so. So it's like a quick intro, where you're at, what you're up to, so you can connect again after if you wish. And then we'll plow on with policy information, where you get it from, and social value stuff. And then the weekend gets back in, and after this I'm burning it off to Leamington Market, because Zuleika's there selling her street food and pickles, so I'll let you know how she's doing. Right, anyway, go get some lunch. See you soon. So I'm not expecting everyone to have dashed back. You're all right for a minute. I'm just going to set up these breakouts I promised. We can at least get a chance to chat to somebody else. There we go. I'm sorted. Well, I set up. I'll be back in a second. Once I can see people are trickling back, we'll set up those breakout rooms for 5 minutes or so and then try and whiz through some bits before we wrap up. And then probably set up another session. Okay,
Say hello to Nicola. Hello, Nicola.
great. I think Sabina's just arriving, so I'll
Yeah, hiya, sorry. Hope I'm not late.
Fine. Absolutely fine. I've only just physically come back. I appreciate it's a long day on Zoom, but there's kind of no way around it at the minute. I would have come down, but it just made better sense to kind of try and get more in.
Hi, we're back. Welcome,
cool. As promised, I was just setting up some breakouts. Sabina, there you are. I'm just going to put you in. Where am I putting you in here? That works. Great. So what I've done, I've not put Arfan in one because I'm assuming he's up to bits and bobs, but I've just set up 2 breakout rooms. We've got Deb, Mark and Ebony in one, and then Emma, if she's back, with Safina and Zabina in another. And I was just going to leave you for, well, probably till past, and then we'll try and whistle stop what we can in the last half hour. I think there's a lot there, so I will probably end up doing another session of some sort, just because I'm sure everybody's had enough information for one day. But let's open up these rooms so you can get chatting and wake ourselves up a bit after lunch. So I'm clicking open all rooms. What that means is you should get a little invitation. If you need a hand, Emma, let me know. You should get a little invitation that pops up to say join this breakout. And if you just click to accept the invitation to join that breakout, it should take you through. Oh, the system's working. I don't know if Ebony's back yet, but I think that's working. Let me just going to join this one for a second. Join room 1. Yes. I'm just going to pause that. I've only